second delay that we always have. Florida, she says, hi, by the way.
Hey, what's going on?
I haven't seen you in a week.
Yeah, that is weird. I guess no one knows that. But is Call Note on? That is the question.
Oh, no, but we're definitely live
Hello,
on YouTube
everyone.
now. Where is Call Note?
Oh, fuck. See, what you guys didn't see is that me and Riley were totally on time, and then I went to go move the computer, and I touched the power button.
Oh, did it turn off?
And no, it didn't turn off, but for some reason, it just turned down Chrome and was like trying to restart, but I needed to like kill all the apps, but I was like, don't kill all the apps, please. And I saved it before it started over again or turned off. But
okay, well, Call Note's recording.
Call Note's recording
and we're
now,
live.
So hopefully that's.
Sorry, everyone, that we're 8 minutes late. It's my fault.
All right. Yeah. So besides the whole power thing, me and Riley got back again on time, I think. And then Melissa was out babysitting.
I told you to start without me.
I know. But... And Evan said finally.
Whatever. I have no words.
I guess we'll start with t-shirts are available on portcitypythons.com. Everything that you put in towards the t-shirts goes to support the podcast and keep everything going on that we do here. What else do we usually say? Amazon links are in the description below. They are on the podcast description as well as the descriptions on all of our YouTube videos. And then that is really it. This week, was it during the week? I think it was during the week. Dallas and Amanda Rua came over. They were going to the International Herpetological Symposium. So thank you guys for stopping by and checking out the collection. And we also did some herping.
You went herping with them?
Well, yeah, we went up to the DFW Reptarium because we were like, damn, we've got this weird like 3 to 4 hour window going on.
Okay.
So it's like we need to do something. So we went to the DFW Reptarium. We walked around there for a little while, and then we're like, okay, we still got to do something. Okay. And then we were up there, so we went to that reserve that we used to live across.
By the colony?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I wish I knew the name of it so I could actually let people know.
We know it's the colony.
Maybe
Texas.
It's better that people don't know. But we found it was hot as fuck. First of all, it was like 104 degrees, and it was like 3:30 in the afternoon. I wasn't really expecting much, but we got a ribbon snake. Well, I needed to like jump down a giant sand dune thing. And like,
I'm so glad I wasn't there.
Yeah, take my shoes off and everything. And then I went to go get the ribbon. And then he like took off into this root system and I couldn't catch him.
So you saw a ribbon snake.
Yeah, well, I reached out and I missed him with my hand open, and he slithered through. And
wow, great story.
So that was our herping. That was all we saw.
So anticlimactic.
Yeah, whatever. But then we hung out with Tony Jerome and Brandon Sander, which you weren't there for as well. and we had some good food, checked out Tony's collection and hung out. So I want to thank everyone who took part in all of this.
Very long story.
All of this very long story. Great Reptile Day. Also, thank you guys for the beer.
One of my favorites, Andy Gator. That's hard to find here in Texas, even though it's only one state over. But, Texas is stupid like that.
There you go. So thank you guys for the beer. There's a bottle opener right there. And today we have on Riley Jimison of Riley's Reptiles. Riley, could you give us a little overview of where you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm now in Sacramento, in Santa Barbara. I keep mostly carpet pythons, but have Brazilian Rainbow Boas and a few other odds and ends. I've been breeding for about 5 years, but really have been interested in reptiles since I was probably 8 or 9 or so. Used to be a zookeeper before I moved up here. And now I'm a lab technician for a company that does a lot of soil testing on levee work and stuff to make sure the levees that are being built and in existence are basically up to par with strength and everything. We're just doing a lot of soil sampling, so it's not as exciting, but I moved up here because my girlfriend got a job at the Sacramento Zoo. We were both keepers down in Santa Barbara, and we wanted to make a change. She was the first one to get a really good sort of opportunity outside, and we just made the leap. And I just rolled the dice on it, and we landed on our feet, and it worked out. So that's where we're at currently.
Right on. So can we go back a little bit? And
Yeah.
did you always grow up and want to be a zookeeper, or in the zoo community, or the zoo profession rather?
To be honest, as a kid, I didn't really think about employment so much. I grew up going to the San Francisco Zoo like frequently. My mom is very much into nature and animals. I've grown up with dogs, cats, birds, rabbits, horses, lizards, frogs, fish, everything in the house from as far back as I can remember. And so I've always been into animals, but the zoo thing didn't really sort of catch my attention until I was just about finished with college at UC Santa Barbara. And I was getting like a year out from graduation about what I was going to do. And my mom was pushing me to go at least just look at the zoo and see what volunteer opportunities there were. So I finally did that, started volunteering, really got a good handle on what zoos were about, which was a complete eye opener. I mean, there's so much more to zoos that people don't see. So that was really cool to learn. And I found out that's what I wanted to do. And so I just volunteered for as long as I could, because that's kind of the best way to get your first start, unless you know somebody, sort of a thing, I guess. And I think a week or two before I was about to leave, like my lease was up, I was packing up, I was getting ready to move back home and call it quits. The zoo director called me on my cell phone at home and offered me a job. So I said, heck yeah.
Great timing.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of anxiety. And at that time I was probably a really unpleasant person to be around, because I was stressing pretty hard. So that's when I sort of decided, like, this is what I wanted to do. And I do miss it a bit now, but I mean, at least I still have my animals at home to get my fix, sort of a deal. So if an opportunity were to arise for me to get back into it, I wouldn't even think twice. But as long as I still have this, I get my fix, sort of a deal.
So did your collection start growing before or after you got that job at the zoo?
So when I was in college, before I even started volunteering, soon as I was out on my own and out of the dorms, first thing I did was start looking around for a reptile that I could get, something affordable, something that piqued my interest. And I actually went and found a water dragon, Chinese water dragon, for sale on Craigslist. And man, I didn't know anything much about them at the time, but I knew that animal was in rough shape. I mean, they had no lights, no UV. The water had like 3 weeks worth of feces in it. It was dry, no humidity. Its pelvic bones were protruding from its skin. It had a broken femur, and it was missing about 2/3 of its tail. It had rubbed off the entire front of its face. And I naively paid these people for it. I should have like chewed them out and just taken it. But anyway, long story short, I got the animal home, and I was driven to learn everything possible. Hooked the animal up, built waterfalls, upgraded him. He did a full transformation, became a huge, healthy water dragon, and lived, another 8 years. And so at that point, I was like, okay, I need to start keeping more reptiles at home. And before I started at the zoo, back into keeping them at home at that point. So I had gotten him, and then I got a Brazilian Rainbow Boa at a show. I discovered reptile shows. I don't remember how I discovered them, but I remember seeing like something online or a flyer maybe, and I was like, wait, they have conventions about these things? I didn't know anybody who wanted to go, nobody who kept I was like, I'm just going. So I drove down for the day, and I walked in the front door, and it was Pomona, actually.
Wow, great first show.
Yeah, so I walk into the door at Pomona, and I literally pay my $15 or whatever, get my wristband, and I walked in, and I just kind of went, oh shit. And I just I did the full lap around probably
Uh-huh.
2 or 3 times, then up and down the middle, and I was like, oh my God. And then after that, I got with a Brazilian Rainbow Boa. I went to another show a month later, walked out with a black-tailed Crebo, spending months obsessing on every piece of reptile content I could. And then that's about all I had when I started at the zoo. And then I learned about all the breeding programs and different species there, and it just downhill.
So how long ago was that, and how long did it take you basically from just starting to get where you are now?
So my first reptile acquisition in my adulthood was probably when I was like 19, when I grabbed that water dragon again. I'd had him a bunch when I was a kid. But at that point, 19, so nine years ago, I started at the zoo 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would say I started really putting animals into the house around 2011.
What exactly did you do at the zoo, and what was your position?
So I got hired on as an apprentice keeper in the reptile department. The way Santa Barbara was organized, it was birds. Well, at first the birds and the reptiles were together, but they split that shortly after I started. So it was birds, reptiles, mammals, and elephants. And within mammals, there's big cats as kind of its own thing. So I was in the reptile department, which took care of everything from piranha, amphibians, turtles, alligator came in, the snakes, everything. We even had a couple birds on our line for a while, so I had the pleasure of really getting to know cockatoos for a while, which was fun. But yeah, just all reptiles and amphibians and invertebrates.
Did you learn more or get exposed to more animals via the zoo or via the reptile shows when you were making those first couple acquisitions?
Probably more at the zoo, because I got to see and be around a lot of the things that you just definitely can't get your hands on in California. As far as crocodilians and venomous go, I got to work with a lot of different venomous. So that was neat. Some of the more, they're available in the hobby, but not like readily available. Like I was working with monkey tail skinks before I even really knew that they were, not very available, $1,200 or whatever they are. But there were some common things, but there were some really odd things there, like Madagascar Hognose. We had Mata turtle, piranhas, yellow spotted Amazon river turtles, got into caiman lizards. So there's some things that like you may see at a show here and there, but I don't know. There was also some really cool stuff that you see at shows that you don't see in zoos too. So I don't know. I like being in both worlds, because I sort of sat right in the middle of that fence. Like I was in the zoo world, and then I discovered sort of the public or private sector, whatever you want to call it, and got to live on both sides of that. So that was fun.
Okay, I have an half off topic question. So now when you go into zoos, are you super like critical or super observant when you go into like new zoos, since you like worked in it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I actually don't really look at the animals all that much.
Is it even fun for you to go in new zoos?
No, it is. It's really cool because everything is different, right? So I've only worked in one, but it was for 6 years. So for 6 years, this is my picture of zoos, right? Every go to one, this picture expands a little bit. And so it's really exciting because zoos nowadays encourage a lot of networking. So it was really fun to go see what other places did. So now, even though I'm not in them, I go and I look at their signage, how they sort of incorporate perimeters in the enclosures, but try and minimize the visibility of it, because that's the whole point, is sort of, bringing us close to, in a safe way as possible, to those animals, make you feel like you're seeing them in their habitat. So I pay attention to sort of those weird things that like you just wouldn't even think about, like the signage, where a rock is placed, hot wire fencing, cameras. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm probably not fun to go to a zoo with.
I was thinking that.
I'm probably the person where you like about 20 minutes. Okay, you can just stop talking.
Well, it made me think of it because now that he does like video editing and stuff, anytime we're watching a TV show, you're so
shit on a TV
he's
show.
so annoying because he notices
right
he notices like all the camera angle, like all the shit that he'll ruin the TV show for me because he notices all the stuff. I'm like, God damn it! I never would have thought about that till you told it.
Yeah. Oh man, well, you can't watch a movie around my girlfriend and I that has any animal references, training, behavior stuff. Oh, she just went and saw Jurassic Park without me, and that's a whole nother sore subject, but she saw it with my aunt and my little sister, and they get back and they're all talking about how wonderful it is, and she starts absolutely ripping on like, that's not how training goes, this is inaccurate, those animals and it's just like
she knows exactly how raptors are trained.
Yeah, and without skipping a beat, I was like, heard none of the dinosaurs had feathers. What kind of crap is that? And everyone's like, dude, Riley. I'm like, oh, whoops. My bad.
So question on zoos. Why do multiple zoos have like outdated taxonomy still up? And signage and shit.
As far
that
as
always drives me crazy.
It's usually because, at least in my experience, we had a whole department that was well, I guess a team is probably more accurate. We had a graphics team that was comprised of people from different departments to make sure they got a varied amount of input to try and make sure it was accurate. But this was in response to exactly what you're talking about. Some signs maybe not being correct. And I guess my guess would be that the signage isn't controlled by the people who work with the animals and the people who are like eat, breathe, and sleep like that sort of tax it. It's the education department, which is probably maybe worse that they're getting it wrong, education department. But anyway, we'll brush that one aside. They're not animal people, they're educators. So sometimes it just comes down to maybe somebody who was involved just like grabbed a resource that wasn't fully up to date online or whatever, or had a book and an encyclopedia in their zoo that wasn't fully up to date. Because I'll tell you, there were definitely signs in Santa Barbara like, this has changed a little bit, or the common name isn't quite that, and the zoo acknowledges it, but they're like, yeah, we would love to do that. But that means reprinting this design, and this graphic costs about $300 to do on this sort of thing. There's this amount of turnaround time. And so there's a little bit of that sort of business politics, I suppose, in there. I can't speak.
It's not just like, let's change it and do it and get it
done.
done.
I mean, I wish it were that streamlined.
You have to think about the percentage of people that are walking through there that know,
that give a shit,
right? Like half, I would say even more than half, probably 75% of the people that are walking through that zoo have no idea if it's updated or not. It's you little 25% who care and even notice. Like, you know, half the people are like, ooh, Latin words, cool. Like,
I mean, to get somebody reading the sign is usually a victory in itself at a zoo. I hate to say it, but most people like pretty colors. I'm here for entertainment. I need to run the kids around till nap time. The football game's on at 3. Like, right. You know, it is what it is. And it's sad to say, but anytime we would hear somebody like reading a sign to their kids, I mean, you talk to any zookeeper, they're like, that's one of my favorite things to hear. That's like the best part of my day. We all turn around and go like, hey, give that guy Parent of the Year award. He just read a sign to his kid. Sweet. Like, that's how rare it is. So it is what it is.
Is there any animal that you can't keep in, say, a setting in where you live right now, but you worked with at the zoo that you would totally keep if there was no holds bar, pretty much?
Water monitors, for sure. Yeah, that was one of the last big things for me. I mean, there's tons of species that I would keep that are commercially available and are not that I worked with at the zoo, but I think water monitors left the most recent impression on me. I was fortunate enough to rescue a yearling, year and a half, 2-year-old maybe, Salvatore from the local Humane Society, ASPCA or whatever it is, down in Santa Barbara. A no-kill sort of contract trapper found him on the side of a freeway in a rain culvert in the middle of December when we were in this crazy, like, below freezing temperature spell, and he was actually alive. He just wasn't moving. They found him and brought him to the Humane Society. Unfortunately, this place had a heat lamp and a 20-gallon tank. And they put him in that. Obviously, they knew they weren't equipped for that. He tipped a tail. He was the 20-gallon tank. But I got an anonymous message on some, I think it might have been Facebook, from one of their volunteers or something, like, please don't tell anybody I told you this because I could lose my volunteership. Sorry if I've incriminated you at this point.
You didn't
this
say
was a
any
few
names.
years ago, so I hope not. But she basically tipped me off ahead of time, and by the time I reached out to them, they're like, yeah, it's been 7 days. He can legally be adopted out. The owner hasn't claimed him. So I drove down morning on my day off and looked at him. I picked him up with a welding glove that I didn't end up needing because he was, probably a little bit underheated, but I don't know. He was definitely somebody's pet at some point based on how well he looked given the circumstances. Called the zoo, told my boss. We had, had previous meetings about trying to bring in some larger education lizards or display lizards for the zoo. This obviously wasn't the route we wanted to go. The zoos try to, get animals from zoos, just like safer than sorry, make sure it's captive born and bred, support the whole industry sort of thing. But this just happened to be a good opportunity, good, positive thing to do for the community. And he was healthy, and they sent the vet out, and the vet tech gave him, a good look over, and he was in perfect shape. So we made the call to try him out, bring him in quarantine. Took him like a year before he was able to really be tactile with us, but he opened up after a couple months. I mean, the poor guy went from whatever he was living in to living on the streets to a 20-gallon tank at the Humane Society to a quarantine tank that was too small that he immediately bit me and kicked my butt in. So he got a bigger upgrade. So that was 5. Then that tank got moved into a backup space. So that's the 6th change. And then he got moved into a semi-permanent tank. So that was a display enclosure that was number 7. Then he finally got hooked up in the big adult enclosure. So he made 8 enclosure changes over those 3 years. So the dude had just all this to adjust to, all this stress and adversity. And by the time I left, he, I could pet him, I could pick him up, I could hand feed him. Everybody on the team could work with him safely. He was a big, curious, but very cautious animal because they're very smart. And I mean, he's just one of the most rewarding experiences of my career. Not just because of the involvement with that animal and their intellect, but because of his backstory as well. He made for an awesome educational animal, just even on display. And he's doing well to this day down there. So it's really cool. And because my team and I were all very close when we left, we had like a big going away party. And they told me that for like a going away present, they named him after me. So they named him Riley. I was like, what? You guys are going to make me cry right now in the middle of a bar. and then I did. I'm not ashamed to admit it.
That's awesome. So you seem you mentioned before the show you have a Savannah monitor, so you're not like many of us are adverse to things with 4 legs. A lot of snake keepers because maintenance and just a million different reasons. So
it's a lot of work.
If you had the space and time for that kind of thing, do you rather things with 4 legs? Do you like some of the monitors? Would you love to have them?
I mean, I'm a snake guy through and through. I prefer snakes over lizards, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna like shut the doors on them. If I could, I would do aquatic turtles. I would do tortoises. I would do crocodilians. I would do monitors. I would do a whole room of tarantulas and centipedes and scorpions. Like I just, there's just so much out there. They're all fascinating. So I like them all. And I think that's probably the zoo's fault because I got to do a lot of that. But, you know, snakes are a little more feasible. They also happen to be at the top of my list as far as all that goes.
I think that's, I wish like it was 1950 and you could still have like a roadside fucking zoo and make a living.
I don't wish it was 1950.
So you could just like, have crocodiles and money.
I don't wish it was 1950 at all.
We can
maybe just that aspect of it.
Yeah,
the pet croc part. Everything else, like, we'll just forget that.
I mean, I feel like in small little towns you can still do that.
I don't know. I don't think there's a few in Texas.
In bumfuck Louisiana, you can definitely do that.
Oh yeah, it happens.
You could definitely still do that.
Yeah, but I feel like that's like where the variety and stuff, and like you charge people like $5 to come through the door. That'd be so sick.
I mean, so many people come over and they're like, "Dude, you need to charge people to come see your place." I'm like, "I don't want people coming out here. Hell no, no."
That's weird.
No thanks.
But it's so cool having that variety and keeping it kind of fresh all the time. And I know that you keep a multitude of species as far as snakes go. So let's hit on, I know you have Brazilian Rainbow Boas and you've bred Brazilian Rainbow Boas, correct?
Yes, I have.
So where are you, or how many, what would you call it? I forgot what the fuck they're called now. I wanted to say clutches, litters. How many litters have you had, and what was your success with them?
I'm waiting on number 2 out of 2. I sold a couple adults that I had just because I didn't want to breed them. They weren't good quality. They're just kind of, I hate to say it because I really like them, but they just weren't like breeder quality. So I ended up only breeding one in 2016. And I bred her again this year to a male from Dave Calling. And so this will be my second litter, but 2 out of 2 is pretty good. She seems to repeat her same cycle, sort of hits her same timeline marks, although this year was, I think, a couple weeks later and set back. But yeah, so I've the 2 adults currently. I had a bunch more, but I've whittled it down to those 2. And then I have one holdback from the 2016 pair. I kept 4 holdbacks, but at one point I needed some money, so I had to. But, this year I intend on keeping another pair and then hitting up. Well, I'm on a waiting list for some high reds from Ike Leitner, and then I need to get into Dave Calling's playbook. He's got some good stuff there, but I'm expecting this litter to drop between sometime the end of July and middle of October. And so that'll be fun. They're just the best boas. I mean, you don't need morphs. There are morphs.
There are.
And there's some cool ones, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of cool line bred stuff. Like Dave, I'll say Dave Calling he's the master rainbow boa man. He's got a lot of really neat things going on there. But yeah, I mean, you don't need morphs necessarily. You could have dozens of animals that look uniquely different and it's all just wild type. So, but this girl in 2016, so she's I guess you would call her an undocumented. She was the best Craigslist find I've ever had. The nice thing about rainbow boas, Brazilians in particular, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's duck. So it's a rainbow boa, so you can with confidence pick something up like that on Craigslist and know that it's not like a hybrid or anything. There's just some funky, wacky things out there.
Yeah.
But so I picked her up. I got a more of a blood red male from a friend of mine who was produced by Dave Calling's Picasso line. And they produced a massive, massive litter of 34 live babies and 1 stillborn. And that's like twice the size of what a litter should be. I think average is 12 to 20. But that's because the previous owners power fed the crap out of her. They were at the guy who I purchased her from at one point told me that they were live jumbo rats once a month, which is absurd for a Brazilian. So her mass is what it is. Like, you can't shrink her down per se. I've kept her lean. Definitely not feeding her jumbos. So we'll see what this sort of like 2-year diet after breeding does as far as litter production goes. But I mean, she produced a ton of huge, healthy babies that year.
And you said that you moved this year, so you have a successfully pregnant female right after moving?
Right after moving and right after evacuating from fires twice in Santa Barbara. We had fires going on from the Thomas Fire in the hills up there. So I evacuated to Paso Robles for 4 days with the entire collection, came back home for 2 days, and then evacuated down to LA for 4 days, and then came back home. During the evacuation, I just threw her and the male together, and they were actually locked up in transit on my way down, and they stayed locked up for the 4 days. So I just left them together. I was like, sweet, I don't got to worry about y'all. Y'all are good. And I came home, and they were just like breeding machines for the next month and a half. I was like, all right, cool.
For those days that you were basically at other people's place with your collection, were they just at room temperature or like a higher ambient temperature than normal? Or
the first evacuation was at Travis Johnson's house. You guys have had him on. They were just in like pillowcases and tubs in his room, and his snake room stays pretty warm, so they're at ambient there. And then in LA, I stayed at Mike's house. Mike is the proprietor of ADD Reptiles, and he's a friend of mine. Has plenty of space, so the majority of them got put in racks, but those boas had their own. I gave them a 41 quart tub and some pillowcases and stuff. Every day I check on them, they're just locked up, just like, man, we're good. Close the door, leave us alone. I was like, all right, sweet. I'll check everyone else. You're fine. And I came home, and it was like nothing ever happened. We moved. It was like nothing ever happened. I got a whole list of all their breeding locks, and the majority of them are from after we moved. So.
And then how long from those evacuations did you end up moving?
That was in January. So maybe like a month. Maybe like a month after. Yeah.
Wow. So they had a lot of stuff going on in 1 month.
Yeah. I mean, it was bad. I thought I got out of all of the 2 evacuations and the move scot-free. I should that a lot of issues would come afterwards, like sort of a ripple effect, because it just like is true to reptiles. They sort of show things later. During the evacuation, I didn't lose a single animal. All that happened was one of my geckos dropped his tail from the stress, one of my crested geckos, which I was super bummed about, because that's the only gecko I've had drop a tail. So that there goes my perfect record. But and then we got home, and everything was fine, and then we moved, and everybody was fine. And as soon as we moved, I had 3 females take a nosedive on me, 3 carpet pythons, and one of them I ended up having to euthanize. And she was like one of my favorite animals. I even have a painting of her, my tiger jag. It was during the middle of breeding season and cooling, and then we moved, and she just tanked. And now I've got other 3 and 4-year-old females that are they're getting there, but yeah, the stress of all of that. It's weird. Reptiles, they just show all that stuff late. Like, everything seems good. You get them settled, and then boom, it all catches up to them. So I'm working on that right now. But
was it like respiratory infection type symptoms?
Yeah, definitely. I think being off heat during the winter. Santa Barbara doesn't get a cold winter, but during that time it was definitely below 50, so it was colder. And then moving and the stress, I feel like moving creates a lot more stress on adult females than it does on males. Males tend to move in search of females. I feel like females tend to be a little bit more sedentary and have a territory. So I've heard plenty of people, the stress is related to that on imports, and sometimes how it takes like 7 or 8 years for import animals, even when brought in as babies, to sort of acclimate. So I mean, I couldn't really tell you. There was no signs of it before. Like, they were literally perfect during the evacuations, perfect during the move, perfect after the move. And then about a month after the move, it was like these 3 females just got hit in the face with something bad. And I'm just like sitting here still cleaning up the mess, I guess. It's not fun.
What kind of carpets were they?
So the tiger jag was the first girl that passed away. And then right now I have 2 females that are fighting strong right now. One of them is a jungle jag, and the other one is a zebra. But they're all females that would be cycling and showing sort of their like first adult hormonal response to nature's sort of cycle, and then to be doing all of this moving back and forth in the winter when it's cold, and they have like a safe spot and there's high stress, and the available climate that needs to be there isn't there. I think there's just a lot of variables that compounded to really put them in a tough spot. So they're fighting it right now. And
you think part of it is that's kind of the season where follicle development may start happening, and then this is happening while all the extra stress is happening, and it's just too much energy sapped out of them?
Yeah, definitely. And that tiger jag passed because she didn't eat well the year prior, so she didn't have big fat sores on her. So of the 3 of them, she was like the least equipped for such a scenario. So,
all right, so we got way too far off topic.
Funny you say that. Oh, wait,
microphone.
I'm just saying, it's funny you say that because y'all are off topic, but the chat is even way more off topic.
They're talking about hysterectomies, I think.
And yeah.
Where's this chat? I want to see this.
So I guess we forget
you can go on our YouTube channel and then click on the live video. That's like the only way you can do it.
Okay, cool. I'll have to look at it after.
That the live chat goes
on. You guys
on.
always talk about it, and it always seems like it's pretty lit in there.
Sometimes definitely, but it used to be that it would go away automatically after the live stream is over, but now it stays up.
All the
but I've had to go take some down because we can't have that up there forever. I think it's a little. I mean, yeah, literally right now we're talking about hysterectomy, But back to topics.
Back to Brazilian Rainbow Boas.
Sorry. Evan asked which zebra.
Oh. I guess he's talking about.
He knows which zebra is from him.
Oh.
I got her from him a couple years ago. It's a Don Patterson zebra. She did not take to the evacuation in the move well. She's hanging in there right now, but her scales look like crap. She just she just stopped eating, and I'm not liking the direction she's going right now. So she's got a vet appointment, and so does the jungle jag. Get them on something. I hate putting antibiotics in these animals, man. Like, I know it's necessary at times, but dude, they don't, like, they recover, but they're not the same after. Like, antibiotics do some serious shit to their liver, and especially because the jungle jag, she's jag. But they just, I don't know. Some animals, like, antibiotics will put off the ailment, but it'll return. I don't know. It's weird. So I try to correct all my husbandry issues and cross my T's and dot my I's and do all my due diligence at home first and make an appointment while I'm doing that. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Do you feel do you feel like being in California, I feel like it's more advanced than the rest of the country in reptiles? Do you feel like it's you've had an easier chance in finding a reputable vet or a vet who's had experience with snakes?
Yeah, I'm 15, 20 miles from UC Davis. So they've got a pretty good program, and I actually have a card of like 3 or 4 different places that I've been recommended to. So I definitely have access to 3 or 4, which I know is not the norm. There are definitely places in the country where the nearest vet that has even seen a ball python is like a 5-hour drive. So
damn.
And I think there's a fine difference in someone who is technically qualified to see a reptile and someone who actually should see a reptile, because I've gone to exotic vets that really suck dick, like really don't even know what I'm bringing to them.
yeah, I mean, even a good reptile vet will tell you they have no idea what the hell is going on half the time because they know reptiles that well. Their systems do just some funky things. Like tortoises take days to come out of anesthesia. The surgeries heal funky in some species. Antibiotics kind of take a weird, like delayed. I don't know. There's just a lot of different considerations, and the few people that I've worked with veterinary wise that know reptiles will tell you like half the time it's a crapshoot because they're just that bizarre. So
yeah, I find it's often just kind of throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks, especially
yeah.
But to go back, we got off of our topic that we were trying to get back onto by trying to get back onto the topic.
Sorry,
it's fucked up. So Brazilian Rainbow Boas, just because we had someone last week in the chat trying to go over or trying to see how to keep and the general care for Brazilian Rainbow Boas. So you kind of mentioned the temps that you use, but also the humidity and stuff like that. Is there any type of special requirements?
It's just paying attention to the shed. I think that's when an animal gives you a full shed, that's like a good direction. Now, they definitely don't need heat anywhere near like pythons. You can sort of run the Terry Phillip method and keep them ambient at like 80, 82 year round and just sort of influence them with maybe like a day cycle, feed cycle sort of thing. And they do just fine. They're a little more forgiving on the cooling end. You just don't want to make sure they don't get over like 85, 88 sort of deal. I would never run a hot spot higher than 85. If you are going to run a hot spot, humidity is definitely, especially when they're younger. When they're younger, they're very sensitive to a lack of humidity. You can lose an animal to arid conditions. Once they hit that 1.5 to 2 year mark, they become quite hardier, and they'll tolerate sort of that fluctuation where if you say you mist them down or you have a misting system or something, it gives that big burst, and then it sits at like 90% for a day or so, and then it sort of tapers off down to 50, and then it brings it back up and then cycle around. That's okay when they're a little bit older, but when they're babies, you want to make sure they're humid. But you can keep them in a glass tank if you cover part of the lid, and it's not just a full open screen. I did that for the first Brazilian I ever owned, and she did great. But tubs work really well for them as far as maintaining humidity. Using lots of moss, humid hides, bedding that's really good at holding moisture. Those will give you a lot of time and headache. But yeah, I mean, if you do that, you spray them down a couple times a week at most, unless you're in a humid environment like Florida or something, then they're great. I run a humidifier just because where we're at here, we're getting sort of pretty dry heat right now. But I spray them down once a week and they're fine.
Mm-hmm. And what are you using more specifically for substrate? And then how do you set up the humid hides and all that?
Yeah, right now I have my adults on a mix of it's like the small coconut chips and or the husk chips and Reptisoil and the coconut fiber stuff. Anything, a mixture of that is nice, and then moss in like a hide, and anything can work for a hide. It can be those Zoo Med like ceramic hides I use for some of the smaller animals, or it can be something like an upside down pan that you carve, just because if you've got big adults, sometimes they don't make hides big enough. Like those big plastic nice ones that are made for them, those will work. But for my big girl here, I had to go get a kitty litter pan and cut it because she's a freak of nature.
Now, are you as adults keeping those in like enclosures? instead of tubs, or you're still in boa tubs?
Yeah, I've got them in an old Neodesha stack at the moment. I do have plans to transfer them into some vision cages that I've been staring at and wondering why I have this entire half a wall of stack of visions that are empty. So they need to move into there so I can be more efficient with my space. But yeah, they're in these Neodeshas that are roughly 3 feet wide by 2.5 feet deep by 18 inches tall. I know people who successfully house adults in 4-foot 8 cages behind me right there, or even 3-footers too, depending on the animal. Adult males can be kept successfully in CB70s or 41 quart tubs, just because males tend to be a little bit smaller. Females, it's probably a little crammed in there, especially if you're intending on breeding. So you can go bigger tubs for sure. I mean, tubs save you all the headache of humid management. But I don't know. The cages are nice just because they like to stretch out at night and kind of move around during the day. They're pretty sedentary.
Yeah, and it seems like you don't have a problem breeding them, but are they typically spring breeders?
Yeah, so I find that if I introduce them during the cool down in the winter, they don't really show much activity until around February-ish, end of January. They might start cuddling up a little bit, but if I put them together in January, they go to the opposite end of the cage with one another. They're very, like, it's not an active thing, but you'll notice they're just on as far polar opposite ends of the enclosure as possible. They're like, don't touch me. Just don't touch me. And then all of a sudden, usually around end of January, February, when things start getting warmer, they'll start showing a little more interest, and then they're inseparable. They just, let's see. Yeah, end of January through February and into March. Every time I put them together, they would lock up for like 2 days at a time. And then when they're done, they are done. They will not acknowledge one another in the same way they get annoyed with each other if you put them in too soon. That's been my experience anyway.
Mm-hmm. And how long is gestation for the female?
Ooh, it's a long time. It's 4 months. So they'll have their pre-lay shed or post-ovulatory shed around March, April-ish, May, depending on the female. And then you might as well count 120 days after that, and that's about when they drop. For the majority of them, the earliest rainbow boa babies are usually the end of July, but most of them are being born as late as October, November, even. So wow. I would definitely say they're a little bit more on the late winter, early spring breeding.
So you said when we were talking earlier that it looks like your Brazilian ate another Brazilian. So, I mean, you can tell, is that just post-ov or is she a little bit further along than that? And you can always tell kind of she's pregnant and will grow.
So I saw her ovulate, and I mean, she's a big girl already. So to see her ovulate, which I never expect. I know boas tend to hide that pretty well as compared to pythons. Maybe it's just because they're denser bodied, but it looks like she ate a rabbit, like a big rabbit, when she ovulates. It's absurd. I feel horrible for her for about 3 days because she leaves her hide, she sprawls out, and it's just like that. You can see lines between all of her scales. The scale separation is absurd, and then it goes down. And then she sheds. And then for like the first month or so, you don't really notice anything. And then right around the 1.5, 2 month mark is when she seems to start side rolling and really blowing up. And right now she's just 24/7 scale separation between those lines. Her colors are even lighter. You can see the skin. She spends a lot more time rolling. She really does not like me during this time of year. I leave her alone. I do not mess with her. She's fast for how big she is. She just goes from 0 to 100, and I've dealt with that a few times, and it's not fun. But Yeah, looking at her right now, I mean, even her back scales are just kind of like there's enough of a separation where you can see sort of that lighter color in between. She's big. She looks like she ate way too much pizza or something. Like me, like after tonight, I'll have had a couple beers. I'll be sitting on the couch like.
Now, does she still eat during this period?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I don't overdo it. I give her much smaller meals than I normally would, and I don't offer more than once a month. My thought process on that is if they're going to take it, that's not a bad thing. Biologically, if eating were detrimental during this period, they wouldn't do it. Now she's big. She had plenty of resources, of course, during a captive situation. Provide them with ample resources, which is why they're comfortable breeding. But during that period, if she's going to continue to eat, my thought process is it's only more nutrients and resources during this. And a 4-month gestation period is a lot on them, which is why I never recommend, at least in my experience, breeding her. I wouldn't ever breed her back-to-back years. And I think Travis, he's kind of my go-to guy as far as picking brains of boa-minded people. He doesn't breed his boas every year. He breeds them every other year. I feel like it takes a lot out of them. So I try to feed them. If they'll take it, they'll eat it. Great. So I just don't ever offer anything bigger than like a smaller medium rat during this time because, she's a big girl. So that's a small meal for her.
Okay, so I've heard boa people kind of explain the gestation period to where you are kind of incubating eggs inside of a female.
Mm-hmm.
Are you super particular about how the temperature goes, keeping the same gradient? And if you had to evacuate, you think it'd be fucked? Like, are you really concerned about keeping the temperature when she's pregnant?
Yeah, actually, Sacramento gets really hot, so I'm keeping a very close eye on her. And for the most part, they hug the heat. They just soak up as much heat as possible. So during this time of year, because it's hot, I'm keeping an eye on her. There are a couple days where she leaves the heat, but she only does it for a few hours. So I know she's able to escape and go onto a cooler end. But yeah, that's 100% accurate. I could, if I were to move her to Arizona where I just couldn't get, the temperatures down and say I didn't have AC or anything, I would expect a bunch of like preemie babies that were stopped and just cooked and just ruined. So I am very cautious of overheating. Provide them a thermal gradient that gives them the acceptable range. They should be fine. But yeah, that's exactly what's happening. She's at the 2+ month mark right now. So if we're talking pythons, that's at the point where an egg is already on the ground and partially going. So at that point, an embryo is maybe just taking shape. So we're still in a critical period as far as I would regard it.
You're really only safe for that last month or so, or
maybe
not even safe, but
yeah, who knows? You could probably get 3 months in, and then if you had a spike at the end, all of a sudden you get full-term babies that have like an eye issue or something minimal, but like could have been avoided. Who knows? But yeah, as long as you give them the gradient, you don't overheat them. It's pretty good.
This guy, Brandon Wheeler, you may know, he asked, do you purposely drop temps for them in the winter like you would carpets, or do you just let the room do what it does?
Both. Yeah,
because you did kind of mention a little bit of a drop, but
yes, it's not extreme like carpets. It's very minimal. So I keep a hot spot nowhere higher than 85 for the rainbows. And if you think about like going through the bottom of the cage and then the substrate, by the time they're sitting on something, it's probably more like 81, 82. I do replicate a little bit of a drop, but they're a little bit more equatorial. So it's nowhere near as dramatic. What I do is I still do it gradually over about 2 weeks. But I take it from about 85 to only 75. So it's really minimal. And that's just the night temps. And during the day, they still have access to a warmer end, but I'll program to more like 81, 82. So the drop is like, it's minimal. It's enough, but it's minimal. And these animals are pretty in tune to light cycles. So if you've got a window in the room, even if they're not facing it, there's some ambient light that fluctuates. The temperature ambient will change according to those seasonal changes. So I think all of that makes a little bit of an impact. So I do all that, and then I cycle feed them like I do with my carpets. I don't really feed the rainbows much at all during the winter.
So explain cycle feeding for those who aren't necessarily versed in it. Plus, like, people do it differently, but explain how you would do it for your Brazilians.
So yeah, the whole concept of cycle feeding is to replicate prey availability seasonally in the wild as they would experience. So with certain biomes, that tends to fluctuate with the rainy season and the dry season. Rainy season tends to elicit much more plant growth, then therefore rodent growth, therefore predator, and yada yada, so on and so forth. So for the rainbows, I sort of replicate during those drier seasons a little bit of less access to food. And so let's say November, usually late October, November is when I'm already tapering off the size of the food. They're still getting fed at 2 to 3 week intervals for adults, but it's getting a little bit smaller. And then I give them like 4 or 5 weeks to basically not eat and go to the bathroom as much as what's available. And when I drop the temperatures around like late November, December for them, because it's almost around the same time I do it for my carpets. And then they don't eat through about the end of February or March, and I bring them back up gradually again, similar. But the only thing that's really different is the females cycle much later than carpets, and I don't start pairing the rainbows until later than the carpets.
Mm-hmm.
Do you notice a change in temperament ever when you're reducing that size and time, like how often you're feeding?
Yeah, they definitely pick up on like the seasonal shift. It's funny. The females definitely seem to be more on edge during that time.
Because they're like, fuck you, I want food.
Yeah, I think they take things more like a feeding response because they're like, this is a critical period of time. If that's food, I need to react as fast as possible. I need to make sure I'm prepped and ready to go. So yeah, I definitely see that with the female. They'll just get a little more touchy. They just tend to flee more. They're not as quick to turn and defend. They're just kind of like, leave me alone. I just got to get out of here. And they just take off. This female is not fun around the winter time.
It seems like half of the year because it's either not eating or it's pregnant. So.
Yeah, and after her first litter, I mean, okay, so before I bred her, I actually brought her to a couple of schools and let like kindergartners and first graders pet her, and she was great. I'd give her like breaks to put her back in the tub, then kind of bring her back out and do this. So it was in short spurts, and she was an angel. And then, man, after she had that first litter, she like hit this maternal instinct mode where she gives you this eye where if you start coming in there, she's like, what the hell are you doing in here? And I have footage that my housemate took from me while I was at work of her checking all of her babies, and she's like nosing all of them, make sure they're okay. And as soon as she recognizes the phones there, she's like, what is that? So she's scary, and she's lit me up a few times at night. She's no joke. She hits hard, real hard. She's fun.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that I think some of us appreciate that in an animal. It's like showing it's the fact that you still have an animal at the end of the day, and it'll still act like an animal and like give you the consequences of a 6-foot animal. I mean, a boa that you have. I mean, it's not a small animal, but I mean, I struggle with the fact that, I mean, people, when you see your animal cruising, especially because I do kind of a seasonal feed, but I also just feed much less, I think, than a lot of other people. But also, when I see them cruising and I know that they're hungry, like I know that they're supposed to hunt, and maybe they're not supposed to be successful catching them every time. But do you like have trouble not feeding them sometimes, or
No? Oh God, no.
is there
Sorry, I'm
anything?
plugging my battery or my charger in right now, and I'm fumbling over it because I don't want to piss off the rainbow. No, they're garbage disposals.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's hard to get across the message to people who want to have a snake and know that every time it eats is a sign of health. So you need to feed it every week, and if it eats every week, things are good.
That's yeah. You can go down too far with that for sure, especially with them. These things will eat every day of the week if you let them. To give you an example of how good of feeders these are, and I don't know if other rainbow boa breeders have had the same, like, I'll call it luck right now because it's a one-time instance as far as my statistics go. But she had her first litter was 34 live babies, one stillborn. And I specifically remember being at a show a couple months prior, talking with Dave Calling, asking about how his season's going, how things were going, because I was anticipating my first litter, and I asked him just numbers, what is he average, what, and I happened to ask him what his record was, and he was like, my biggest litter is 34 live and one stillborn.
Oh, stick it to him.
And I was like, holy crap, dude! I had no idea. Like a couple months later.
And how long has he been breeding Brazilians?
Longer than I've been keeping reptiles, man. He is the rainbow like guru. Like that's the guy I go to. I study his website. I study his care sheet. I've replicated his processes. I've sort of just tried to tune him in.
So what you're saying is your Brazilian's way too big or way too fertile?
I mean, maybe both. All I know is that the second owner were 100% responsible for her being the size she is because of their feeding regimen, and that definitely has a correlation to her fertility. I mean, just her mass. That's just how it goes. Her mass is so large there's just a trend. The bigger the animal, the more follicles, the more eggs, whatever. I wouldn't say she's necessarily obese now. When I first got her, she was fat. Like her back did that sort of like, the sides. Like a boa should be a loaf of bread where it's sort of like this. And rainbows tend to be pretty close to that. So you should see a little bit of spine, especially when they're like moving over something. And dude, I mean, you're talking about like she had a downward dent on the top of her back where her spine was. And I was like, dude, you're fat. And they had her in a tiny little glass tank. They're chucking live jumbos, and whatever. Yeah. She's in good hands now. She eats well. She doesn't get fed more than once a month, and it's smaller meals, but not terribly small. And she's got good body tone to her now. And I'm actually really curious to see how she produces this year as a result of 2 years on sort of my feeding regimen.
I mean, would you be happy to have, 30 out of 30 babies? You think that would be actually going in a better direction than having another, 36 out of 36 or something like that? Or
yeah, I mean, I would like to see 100% fertility. That one stillborn to me was kind of like any bigger is too much. Like she obviously had the eggs to produce 35, but maybe that's just pushing it. Don't get me wrong, I love having tons of baby snakes. That was so much fun. Like I love Brazilian Rainbow Boas, and when I went from 38 really quick, I was like, yes.
How many did you have in your collection at the time?
I think I had 40 at the time, so it
there
almost
nearly doubled.
Dude, my work would every day those things would eat and piss. But the best part about them was I don't remember where I got it. I remember I spent ages and ages looking online in preparation for this, and I remember one source, one page, and I don't even have a bookmark. I'm gonna go dig it up after this, actually, see if I can. But somebody wrote about them feeding pretty early on, and I was like, well, that seems unconventional. Most people wait for them to shed. I'll give it a shot. And I had a bunch of rat pinkies, and those things take no time to thaw. So I thawed like a dozen, and 5 or 6 babies the day after they were born grabbed them and wrapped them. And I was like, holy shit. So I pulled out a bunch more. And 24 hours after this litter was born, 22 of them had struck, wrapped, and consumed frozen thawed rat pinkies.
Wow.
The next day, another 8, and the next day, the rest of them. So within 72 hours, the entire litter was eating frozen thawed rat pinkies. It was stupid easy. I mean, it cannot happen again this year. There's no way in hell that's gonna happen.
You're gonna get the other side. You know, like when I feel weird saying this, like humans get really easy pregnancies, like then they're like the next one is gonna be fucking terrible.
Yeah.
Like,
no, I'm expecting them all to like not eat, and well, I guess all those bit the crap out of me anyway. But yeah, I'm expecting them to be horrible just because my luck was so stacked that one time. I'm like cursed now.
Do you know what the norm is as far as getting them started eating?
I mean, they're pretty good eaters, so I know that most people don't have too much trouble getting them feeding it, especially after first shed. But if you've got a well-fed female that is devoting the appropriate amount of resources, and these babies are coming out with, you know, pretty well-absorbed yolks, and they're coming out right away, and they're clear, and their eyes look good, and they're healthy, and they're breaking out of their egg sacs right away, and everything just shows good, vital, strong babies, there's no reason they shouldn't eat immediately after shed. I just happened to get, you know, this fluke idea of trying it earlier. I would have never tried it earlier, and I never tried it with any of my other species either. I just read it somewhere, and I was like, that's odd. Okay, I'm bored. All right.
I'm pretty sure someone fed a corn snake out of it that just pipped out of an egg once. So
I've seen a photo of that. Yeah, yeah, it's still in the egg, and it's got a pinky in its mouth.
That's insane.
There's always those animals.
But I
like,
wouldn't do that.
I read what you wrote about me. I'm gonna piss you off right now.
Go for it.
So, like, yeah, I bet you those babies there's always just those one that is just like, yeah, I'm gonna break convention right now.
What's keeping you from trying it? You said you wouldn't do it. What's keeping you from trying it?
I don't know. That's just not the way I do things.
But if you put it in front of them, they don't eat it. Okay, tough tits.
Yeah,
if
I
they
don't
do
think
eat
there's
it,
anything
also,
wrong with it.
So why not try?
All right, man.
I feel like the odds of success are pretty low. Like that has to be a fluke.
But why not try?
Oh, absolutely. Go for it.
If they don't eat it, you give it to
someone else.
Well,
it's a waste of my time, really.
Wow, because your time is just so valuable.
When you have 100
my God.
Babies.
We don't have 100 yet. We have 8 right.
We don't have 100 yet,
8
but
right
there's
now.
100 eggs.
But you could try it with the first 8 and see how it goes, right?
Sure. All right.
Those babies you posted those corn snake babies are pretty small, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, they were pretty good as far as our last babies took 96 days to hatch, which is very interesting.
Right on whole pinkies, or do you do like pinky heads or whatever?
Whole pinkies.
Yeah.
So most of them will take whole pinkies. If there's an exceptionally small one, then it will be a pinky head, or
right on.
The ones that don't want to eat, and you have to give them like mouse tails or something.
Yeah.
That's a whole thing.
That method works pretty well. I've had good success doing that with stubborn carpets. I had a couple baby jungles that just wouldn't eat, and just assist feeding rat tails just really a couple times, and they're gone. They're good.
Honestly, I've had better success just giving them in a null, and then the problem is getting them off of nulls from that point. So pretty much 99% of corn snakes will eat in a null. Even your worst eater, they'll be like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna take this a null." But
should I just try it? I don't know. We should try it. We're gonna do it tomorrow. Okay.
What? Okay, sure.
Feed these 8 and just
all right,
see.
we're doing it.
Okay. Can I ask my other question?
Go for it.
It's not my fault if it doesn't work. I promise.
I mean, but if we don't lose anything by trying.
I'll wait until the next clutch pips in like 3 days, and then I'll do one.
No, okay. See, I feel weird doing it pipping. I don't want to do that.
Dude.
I don't want to do that. That's weird. They're not even out yet. That's like it.
No, it's fucked up. I agree, but if you're gonna do it, you might as well go all the way.
But other Brandon, I feel weird calling him that.
Yeah, I bet you an MBK.
Other Brandon brought up the fact that like, oh, they eat the yolk sac, like that's a meal, free meal right there. They get so they're ready to eat something if they're eating the yolk sac.
Right, but the fact is that they're full most of the time when they're absorbing that yolk, and that's the idea of why you kind of wait for them to settle. There's Candoya or things with slower metabolisms. Honestly, most boas with slower metabolisms, you figure they're going to be good for like 2 weeks. Candoya, it's like don't even fuck with them for a month, at least most people, and then you start.
So it's like short tails take months to even have their first shed.
They're just fucking.
That's just like.
And they shit like twice a year.
Yeah. So. Like, to me, that's just not right.
Yeah. And it's like that means you got to hold on to these babies. I don't know if they're feeding, and it takes you forever to get them going. But I'm just used to turning them over. But
okay, on the topic of Rainbow Boas, what is your typical like customer base with those?
First timers,
or all
for the most part. There's a couple people that are. I've got a few people that are like they have one. They found one and they're like obsessed and they need like a couple. But for the most part, it's first. They walked around a show and they saw one or they saw a video and they just like they got hooked on that pattern, that iridescence enough to go look into them and found out one, they're moderately easy to care for and two, readily available. So I've got people that are like, look, I really want a cool snake that doesn't get huge, it's pretty, and this is sort of what I've come up with. I'm like, well, you're on a great track. I mean, they're fantastic animals. This year I have a couple return customers that are like, I have one or two from that first litter and I want more, and that's awesome.
Why are they some of the best looking animals we have in captivity, yet not enough people work with them? And they're probably one of the most commonly imported species. So why don't we have more people like you, or more importantly,
why are there not more Rileys in the world?
I get asked that question every day.
But why haven't we gotten to the point where those are captive bred? Because they don't seem to be terribly hard to breed. But
no, they're not.
No one's fucking with them enough to.
And they're beautiful iridescence, and we like pretty colors.
And they sell, obviously. But.
Right.
And there are morphs now. There are definitely like if you're going to include.
But nothing's better than the original.
There's definitely morphs, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good question. I think part of that comes down to a couple dynamics. One is market trends and supply and demand, right? So those are your two big things you're looking at. The market favors what is lucrative and what people are going to buy, right? So when you have a market full of millions of people that are really into maybe like 5 to 10 niche animals, and the common thread seems to be like morphs and ease of access and ease of care, then that sort of dominates those trends. And when rainbows sort of just fall out of that fringe, because although their breeding is relatively similar and simple, they have that added little little layer of the humidity, and sometimes that scares people because that implies a little bit more of daily attention and maintenance and regular sort of care, whereas a lot of the times people are attracted to snakes because they don't need daily care. And so when you think of a rainbow boa in a glass tank and somebody who doesn't really have the wherewithal or the plug-in to know that there's plastic cages and not screen tops and all this stuff to make your life so much easier, thermostats, all of a sudden it becomes a burden. So I think to the majority of the customer base and those that are out there buying reptiles, it's people that are just getting into it, right? This is a pretty fledgling market as far as the mass consumer is concerned. So any like speed bumps and things that require like an extra attention to detail all of a sudden puts that species just like that much more as far as advancement goes. And humidity is just one more thing to think about. So
It's
I
sad
think
that such a little thing could keep people away from breeding
yeah,
an amazing species when there's thousands of people breeding ball pythons. All you
sure.
have to do is put in a fucking humid hide and you can breed something completely different. And, you
Yeah.
know, I don't.
I mean, maybe it means that people are like aware of what they're capable of, and they're not going to go like kill these snakes inappropriately because they just don't know how to keep. Maybe that's the silver lining I'm going to think of.
I also breed corn snakes, so don't listen to me.
I've kept rainbow boas in glass tanks and done it successfully, but that's maybe because I was a zookeeper at the time and I sort of had the tuned in wherewithal. I don't know. But so there's a little bit of that, and then I think part of it is a supply and demand, like a morph thing. Call me crazy, but snakes tend to be for the counterculture of people who maybe not.
You're crazy, man. We're normal.
Crazy. So
totally the majority right here.
It's a lot of counterculture, right? So people sort of they find this thing that is a little bit weird to the norm, and that they find their identity in that. And then when you get into that, and you all of a sudden there's morphs and there's different things, and you can express what you like and you don't like in that. All of a sudden, there's a lot more identity involved. And rainbows, I mean, when you think about Brazilian rainbow boas, do you think about morphs? No, you think about just their natural thing, right? So maybe there's a little bit of that. Say morphs are bad because there are definitely morphs and rainbows, and I'm definitely chasing a few of them. I don't own any, but that's the other part of it. Like rainbow boas, people who like them like a lot of natural beauty, sort of like the old school colubrid heads. They really like old colubrids because back in the day when you didn't have internet and you couldn't export and you couldn't do this and that, all you had were like red-tailed green rat snakes and gray rats and all these cool like natural phases of things. So maybe there's a little bit of that in there. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know everything, but they're definitely on a rising trend. I need to buy more because I need to make more because I have this like never-ending list because people want them, people like them, and I can't blame them. They're pretty rad. So,
and I think it's important that more and more people get into these kinds of things, especially things that are popular but don't necessarily get captive born. So you go to shows, you see a lot of rainbow boas, you see a lot of Sumatran short tails. There's a few themes that keep on repeating, and it's like, fuck, why don't cool people just breed these so we can have like good ones that aren't fucked up?
Can breed them too.
Yeah, we're uncool people that are at least responsible.
So there's like this fine line of like, you don't want to mass produce, but you want them still available. You don't want them to be like super popular, but still appreciated. I think they're gonna, there's waves and fads and trends, and that will kind of come and go. And I think they're on the rise. I think more people will start to appreciate them. They're a moderately sized boa that is a little bit more forgiving husbandry wise than some of the other ones. And as long as you don't overheat them, they're pretty rad. So I think, I mean, in the last 3 years, I've seen an upward trend in them, and that's just in my very small sample size.
Now, ready for the transition? Talking about upward trends, and things that are very heavily imported. Madagascar Hognoses.
Wait, who did we talk about these recently?
Yes, with Ellen.
With Ellen.
So, what species or phase? I'm not sure 100% how they work, so I'm kind of an idiot. So, just tell me what you're working with.
So the Madagascar Hognose consists of 3, as far as I'm concerned, there are 3 full species. You have Leoheterodon madagascariensis, you have Leoheterodon modestus, and you have Leoheterodon gayi. The Madagascariensis are the typical giants, as their common name goes. They're the very black and yellow checkered ones. The modestus are the common name for them is the blondes because they're sort of this color gold, and then the gayi are the speckled. And I believe that also is the same order in size, with Madagascarians being the largest and Gaea being the smallest. So there's 3, and I believe they are the full species delineation.
Are they all native to Madagascar?
They are, and they are a great example of sort of this divergent evolution where they have zero relation to the North American North American hognose. They're not even the same genus. They don't even have keeled scales. They're not even on their own, like they're their own trajectory. They appeared later after a split as far as phylogeny is concerned. So they're pretty unique in that way. The North American species have more of a pronounced snout. Yeah, the Madagascar a little more narrow and it's pointed, and some have a little bit of that shovel, but it's nowhere near as dramatic. So I currently have 2.1 of the Madagascarians, because what I have been told is that for that particular species, their breeding is rather undocumented. It's a little less known about them, and most people seem to find success when there are multiple males, whether that be for stimulating competition or breeding balls or what, or just increasing the odds. I'm not sure. But then the other ones, I think it's rather similar. Their care is pretty much the same. They, as far as I know, have all at least been bred once or twice in captivity, if not a couple times, but that is not a common species. You're 9 times out of 10, if you ever see them at shows or available, what you're seeing is an imported or farm hatched animal. Occasionally you'll find animals that are captive hatched from a imported female, or somebody who imported some adult animals and cohabbed them, and that's just how it works, because they actually do pretty well being cohabbed, as far as I am aware.
So, when did you first acquire your hognose?
I got ironically, I bought a male soul male from Joe Swatowski right before those fires in January. So I got them in December. Yeah, so as far as my personal collection goes, I've only had them for about 6 months. So I picked that animal up, and then I picked up the other 2 after I got back from the evacuation, but before I moved. So I picked up a pair afterwards. So my collection of the Madagascarians here is 2.1. But I worked with these at the zoo. We had an adult female who was all black, like melanistic, all the way down, a little bit of white on her belly. I've never seen anything like her before. And she was wonderful, and she's the reason why I keep the species, just because I had the fortune of being able to bring her out for educational presentations, and she's super tractable and just really friendly. So after I moved, they're just one of the few species like I need these in my life here now.
so kind of.
Sorry, you were going first.
You guys have the same mindset.
I just had something in my brain forever, but mine was a negative comment, and yours is probably positive, so you can go.
Mine's more of like a question that I would ask someone.
Mine was just negative. Because anything about hognose.
I know you hate hognose, and part of why you hate hognose is the question I was going to ask.
Oh, okay. Well,
so
great.
We're talking about the co-evolution, basically, of these hognose and then the hognose in Madagascar, right? Mm-hmm. So obviously, I have Western hognoses. You love them. You really like them
so much.
And they do the huffing, the puffing, spreading of the neck, the bluff strikes, all that
everything
stuff.
Annoying about snakes.
So how do the Madagascar hognose seem to at least stack up, if not exceed, as far as the bluffs go? So could you tell us a little bit of their behavior?
Yeah, I get the full spectrum in just my 3 animals. The first male I picked up, he very rarely makes any vocalizations. He'll actually feed off the tongs. The female that I have won't eat off the tongs. If I leave it in there overnight, she'll eat it, but she'll give me the full vocalizations. They don't like being disturbed. They'll hiss at you. They will do this thing where they sort of go like in this weird tornado thing where they put their head in the middle and they make tails on the outside and they'll like slap substrate and just slap at you and they're just kind of like wah, 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 and they just do this weird thing where they like pull their head back, throw their tail back at you, and they're like, I'm a ninja, back off. And so they'll do that a little bit. And then the other male that I have, he goes even further to full on hood, stand up and bluff strike at me. I've had standoffs with him where he stood up about 18 inches, and we're talking about a 4-foot animal. He stood up about 18 inches on the far end of his enclosure and then lunged across about 3 feet to just like headbutt me because he was so pissed. Now, granted, it's probably because it was pretty warm, but he's the only one that does that. They don't all do that, but they're very
you called them
excitable.
wonderful.
They're excitable. They're awesome.
Just one of those things that like to be left alone.
Yeah, they can leave themselves alone, not in our collection.
It's not when I clean them, I have to put them in separate tubs because you can't just like hold it while you scrub this one. The female the other day was just running all over the place. I just had to lock her.
It's so nice. Like you notice such a difference between like something that will always bite me and I put it on the ground in the room, or something that I can hold while I clean its stuff. It's so much easier, just that one that you hold.
And the hognose isn't gonna bite you, but it's just gonna be annoying.
Yeah. Or if it does, I mean, there are semi consequences.
Right, true. They are riffing, but like, I just, God,
yeah,
I
I
don't know how you guys like them.
I have an article that is right up on my my bookmarks here about a potential envenomation about a guy who got bit on the hand, and it was no more than a little bit of swelling and irritation for the first 4 to 8 hours, and by the time he woke up the next morning, it looked like a cat bite, basically, where the teeth went in, because they don't just like hit, they sort of hit and chew and kind of
yeah. Yeah, I mean, you see that even in Western, which is weird because they shouldn't have this much in common, but they also do and you think that rear fang isn't a big deal because they have to chew on you to get to you, but
it's easier than you think.
Fucking quick. You're not getting that off.
Well, they don't just hit and go back. They hit and just like all of a sudden you're in the back of their mouth. They're like, hey, this isn't so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
but I mean, there's no recorded anything much more than that, is there?
No. Nothing medically significant. No allergies, no hospitalizations, no loss of limb, no necrosis, no nothing.
Brandon Sanders said never keep Easterns, though.
I hear they're just a pain in the ass feeding wise.
Just toads.
So our fucking Westerns are pain in the ass feeding.
But I've heard, I know someone in Texas who keeps Easterns, and they actually go out and catch toads, which is obviously a game that you don't really want to play. But
I had to go get a live mouse for one of mine.
Yeah, I'll take a live.
It was not there this morning. Yeah. That's about as expensive as I get.
So, did you buy these animals? I mean, were they pretty much?
No, he didn't buy these animals.
Asshole. That was a question. Did you buy them as wild caught adults, or what was the situation behind them?
All 3 of mine are imports.
But you bought them, correct?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. Just want to clear that up.
He birthed them himself.
Yeah, they're all wild caught adults. The males are at least 4.5 feet. The female is right around 4 feet. She's a little bit smaller, which is to be expected. But she probably has another year of growth and maturity on her to go for sure.
Wait, did you say the female smaller?
Yeah.
Oh.
So it is typical colubrid fashion.
Opposite of our situation.
What do you mean?
Our females so much bigger
our
than
females
our male.
Are smaller in colubrids and our females are bigger in pythons. Or in westerns. Sorry, I know what you're talking about now. In westerns, females are significantly larger than the male.
Yeah, that's what I've seen. Yeah, no, I mean, she could be younger, but she doesn't seem like it. She seems like she's got the age and maturity on her. She's much smaller than the other 2, but I mean, we'll see. I don't intend on breeding them even next year. I think I'm going to spend probably at least a year or 2 acclimating them for sure.
Did you treat them when you got them in?
Yeah, they've all been given an extra round of fenbendazole. They came into the importer, got treated for external and internal parasites, and then when they all came here, they endured another round of internal parasite treatment as well as a 2 to 3 month quarantine period, if I remember correctly.
Do you get them fecal tested beforehand, or do you just treat them pretty much no matter what?
Depends on the importer. If the importer does some of the treatment and I'm actually going through with it, that means that importer is somebody I trust. But I do actually do my own fecal sampling as well afterwards. While I was in Santa Barbara, it was super easy. I'm pretty good friends with the vet tech, so just bring it.
So you just basically need a microscope.
Yeah, you can get kits online. It's super easy. I think it's like less than $200 for the microscope, the little lenses, the actual containers, and everything. It's really easy. Most of what you're paying for is the equipment, and then a little chart that shows you what you should be looking for as far as the little protozoan bacteria that can generate. But you can get little kits to do it at home. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, that's super interesting. For someone who doesn't like to give snakes antibiotics, do you need to prove it has internal parasites before you treat it, or
No, I treat them regardless.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't feel that would make your animal less than in comparison to, say, an antibiotic?
No, because if it's going through the digestive system, they'll pass it out. I feel like antibiotic and something in the bloodstream can be a little bit more extreme because it'll then end up also manifesting itself in the liver and a few of the other vital organs. And even the best antibiotics that are designed for reptiles can still have like a heavy half-life that still affects the animal and makes them just a little bit weaker as far as their immune system goes later on. I'm not saying don't go to a vet and get the necessary treatment for you.
Absolutely.
Like that's bar none. Like you have to do that when it comes to it for sure. I'm just also saying that sometimes if it's something very minor, do what you can to look at the husbandry parameters to see if maybe something you can fix could potentially correct an ailment, and it might not show results overnight. Again, like we were talking about with reptiles, sometimes they just take a little while to really show a change in things because of the way their biological systems work. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, how do you go quarantining your animals? You said 2 to 3 months. And then what are other kind of things that you watch out for, things that you do in order to make sure that you don't cross-contaminate per se?
So I keep my quarantine in a completely separate room. Everything is very sterile and clear. They're clear. Water bowls are ceramic that can be disinfected nicely. Paper towel bedding. Everything is disinfected with chlorhexidine solution that's allowed to sort of sit and soak. I constitute that solution weekly, so it's not weak when I use it. And I'm looking for external parasites visually for at least the first month or so. I'm checking them daily, and then it just kind of becomes a thing where as long as I'm looking at them here and there, I'll get a good visual. I'm checking the fecals, look for anything that's abnormal as far as its consistency or anything crawling around in there. I take care of quarantine after everything else, or on just a completely separate day, or after a shower. Different set of tools, like everything is separate. Sometimes quarantine will need to, like right now, has a tiny little spot of urates in quarantine right now. He's about due to clear quarantine. He's been in there for a little over 2 months. And I will probably clean him tonight and then shower before I go to bed, just as a last minute thing. Obviously, I'm in here right now. This is the room. I would never do an unboxing video in here. I would never bring him in here. I'd never go feed him and then come back and finish feeding in here. I fed everybody the other night. I set his food out last. So he was the last one that got fed. And he has feeding tongs that are over there, stay at his enclosure, get disinfected, and everything stays at his enclosure. Nothing that involves him even breathing on it comes back in here for several months. And this is even when they're coming from reputable breeders that I know, trust, talk to on a daily basis, that also practice even better diligent quarantine standards than myself. So being in the zoo, I've had the daylight scared out of me seeing some weird. It's not because of anybody's fault. It's just because reptiles hide stuff really well.
So is the specific procedure that you take the same thing that you would do in the zoo? Or are there things that you tweaked?
I try to replicate it as much as possible. The reason being because at the zoo we never had any issues. We never had anything slip through the cracks. We never had any animals show latent ailments that affected the collection later on. It was 100% foolproof as far as my 6 years of experience go with things. And we even detected things in quarantine and were able to remedy them before they even, mingled with the rest of the collection. So I had that nice template of experience to model how I do things around here. And inevitably things squeak through the cracks. Like you just can't. Yeah. You can't beat it all. But I try to emulate that.
Yeah, I mean, being proactive is super important in something that will hide. And it's also like going past where you think you're clear. Also, where it's like, fuck, you're like, I'm sure this snake is fine, but I gotta just.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Absolutely. So,
sure.
Do you have any reservations about keeping them the same as you do in your room that you're in right now with your morelia and your Brazilians and stuff like that?
The Mad Hogs?
Yeah.
No, actually they as far as I'm aware and what I've discovered, the keeping requirements are actually much more in line with the morelia genus. They like it pretty warm. They like similar humidity levels with not too much on the high end, but too arid isn't also favorable. Their digestive system's a little bit more, so I'm much more okay with feeding older animals at a more frequent interval than I am with carpets. But otherwise they do really well at about the same parameters. I have a rack with my hognose and my pair of imported Papuans in the same conditions.
Yeah, I mean, I do something similar. People probably think I'm crazy. I keep everything 85 hotspot and then like 74 ambient. So I have hognose with Amazon tree boa with a king snake with all that shit. But
perfect.
It all works for fucking everyone. So.
Yeah, it sounds pretty spot on to me.
Yeah. So as far as the Madagascar Hognose, they must, I guess, they're colubrid after all. They have a faster metabolism. So how often are you feeding them? How long does it take them to go to the bathroom after they feed? Also,
I'm offering them food weekly, whether or not they take it is a individual. They're going to the bathroom probably twice a week. I'm in there daily, but I'm spot cleaning twice a week.
Okay, so
there you go.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Speaking of going, I ripped the label off. I gotta go.
That's okay.
No, that's totally
good. We get
good.
the benefit of being two of us.
And I will pee right after you get back.
So. All right. We'll do this.
You're not going to leave me alone? That's so nice.
No, I won't leave you alone.
That's so nice of you. While he's doing that,
yeah.
In our little update thing, we didn't update people about our babies, which I know, most people will follow us on Instagram and whatever too, so they've seen our babies.
Yeah.
But I feel like we should let them know. I don't even know because I haven't been here for a week.
Oh yeah, you haven't even. She hasn't seen the new.
I know nothing about them. But I think you should give a quick little.
So we have a clutch of Tessera. It was a Tessera head honey bred to a honey. I don't think we have any Tessera honeys. or honey tesseras, however which way you cut it.
Okay.
But there's 1/8 of a chance of us hitting that. We definitely hit 50% tesseras. We hit 5 out of 9 tesseras.
Explain Sunkiss also, because I saw you commented on someone saying like het Sunkiss. How can you know what a
Sunkiss is a recessive, so some are going to be het non-visual.
But then how the fuck do
they're
you
carrying
know?
the gene because both parents have Sunkiss in them, so everyone's 100%.
Wait, I thought we had a test.
Everyone's 100% honey, pretty much. Everyone's 100% honey.
Right.
Honey is caramel.
Yeah,
and
Sunkiss.
Oh,
yeah. It's
so they all
caramel
have
and
Sunkiss somewhere.
They all have Sunkiss and honey as hets at least, but most of it's visual. So we have quite a few caramel tesseras. We have Sunkiss tessera, and I don't think we have a honey, but I don't want to call it before they shed. We definitely have a honey, just a regular honey. We'll definitely have 8 to 9 regular honeys when this next clutch comes out because it's honey to honey. So we'll have a shit ton of fucking honeys if you're concerned.
Now I know that I'm not concerned. I'm confused. I
want to learn. I want to learn corn snake genetics here.
Cool,
That's a species
do it
I
with
don't
me.
know anything about. I'm in. Let's do this.
Okay, I'm confused because I know that, like, once they shed, they're gonna look so much better. But honeys are fucking yellow. These snakes are not yet.
Right.
How are
it's kind of like
how do we have like the picture you posted today? You're like, oh, I'm pretty sure this is a honey. Like, there's a honey. Yeah. And I know it's gonna shed. It's gonna look better, but it's not gonna shed and automatically fucking magic abracadabra be yellow.
No.
Like, I'm so confused how you're telling me this is a honey, but honeys are yellow. Like,
okay. I was trying to answer your question.
I know, but I want to fully ask my question first.
Okay, well, I got the gist in the beginning, so
well, the rest of the world may not have gotten the gist, you butthead.
Like Riley or anyone else who works with carpet pythons, you have a jungle, it looks like the worst coastal you've ever seen in your life. It just comes out brown and black, right?
Yeah.
And then it sheds one time, it gets a little bit lighter, sheds. In 2 years, it will be yellow and black.
So you're telling me the snake you posted today is going to be yellow?
Is going to be yellow in 2 years. In 2 years. Just give it 2 years.
I've seen crazier. I've seen some of Travis's Stillwater hypos, like patternless bulls that are like, they hatch out like this orange, just red, and he's like, that thing's gonna look like a super zebra when it's adult. I'm like, are you fucking kidding? It's like, yeah, the thing's gonna be all yellow. I'm like, well, it ain't yellow right now. It's a different shade of red.
Yeah.
Snakes blow my mind like that.
I just can't even fathom that.
Yeah, I mean, there's ball pythons that start off the best they're ever gonna look, and then there's many other pythons and colubrids that will start off shitty looking and get better. I don't know what it is about
shit when they're born.
There's just certain animals. I don't know what it is about that, but that honey will get lighter, and it looks like a totally different animal.
I mean,
from
it's not
baby
even
to
close.
adult.
Like, I thought maybe it'd be like a muddy, like mustardy, like I thought, but it has no sense of yellow.
It looks
in
different even coming out of the egg, because coming out of the egg it's wet and it's like dark, and then after 2 days it's like cloudy shed, like about to shed type of animal, totally in blue, and then it sheds again, it turns into a different animal. So it's like it comes straight out of the egg, it's wet, it's darker than usual, so it's hard to tell, and then it's in a shed like state of blue. And
that's annoying, because what if we sell it and it turns out to be like the most beautiful honey in the world?
Well, I do
and
lowest
we don't
common
even know.
denominator. So I say I definitely know this has this and this in it, right? And then you may be getting an extra gene if you're lucky. And
but even just honey in general, we can't even tell how it.
No, I can.
Oh, you're fucking psychic. Like,
no,
how can you tell? It looks completely different.
Right. But it looks consistent with what a honey hatchling would look like. And trust me, you'll have 9 more to judge it by.
Next time,
we'll be able to know. Anyway, we can get into our buddy Dan was asking about some jungle projects and particularly striped jungles. So could you let us in on what you're doing in Morelia, what you're doing in jungles? I know you have zebras, you got different shit going on. So specifically, what's going on with your striped jungle project?
So I have a 2012 female from Psychotic Exotics that has these several sections on her back that are striped, and everything about her lends to stripes perfectly. She's got this creamy black velvet sort of color and this nice canary yellow. So she lends great color to any project. She has the potential to complement nice striping. So I picked up a male this year from Chris Salemi, and it was initially sold to him as a female. And given how tiny carpets are, sometimes they're a pain in the butt to sex when they're babies. But it turned out to be a male, and he kept it obviously because it's a quality animal. And he purchased this animal from Ed Lilly, and this is the product of a Van Deventer line animal. And Terry Van Deventer is notorious for quality striped jungles. So it was a Van Deventer line jungle to an ivory jungle that produced this male in 2013 that I have. So Van Deventer jungles tend to be kind of more of like a honey gold color, and then paired with the ivory, it was like a nice average between the two. So I picked that male up from Chris. So I have good lineage and good striping and color background in that animal, and then I have just this screaming selectively bred jungle female from Psychotic, and I have no doubt in my mind that what will result will be great striping from the sires and complemented with some excellent color from the dams. And I paired her with a striped male 2 years ago that ended up to have a little bit of coastal, and I mean, those animals were just nuts. They're screamers, absurd animals. So she called well. And this will be sort of the revamping of that project, making it more pure coastal than anything, or excuse me, pure jungle, not coastal. There's
How
zero.
dare you, sir?
How dare I? There is no coastal in that. It'll all be jungle. So
Unless you're of the camp that thinks that jungles are coastals, and of course, it's all coastal in that.
Well, you know, if a DNA geneticist tells me that they're the exact same thing, I will say, okay, then there's got to be a further subdivision beyond that. But that's a whole nother
to
thing.
Us, these are jungles, and it's very phenotypically what we expect out of a jungle.
All I know is that morphologically they're totally different animals. They're just not the same. There's nothing the same about them. Proportions, behavior, nothing. But yeah, so I've got a cool striped jungle project going. I've got a pair of zebras that could go this year, but might look like the following year, depending on the female. She's kind of flirting with the edge of being ready. I have a tiger male that'll be going to a caramel female. What else? Oh, I have a jungle jag female that might meet a diamond coastal jungle sibling from a gamma pairing. So there's some gamma line in there. And for those who don't know what gamma stuff is, those are those really bright neon jag crosses. So that'll be like, if it ends up going, those will be some nice looking jags. I'm kind of shying away from jags a bit these days, but it's been something I've been wanting to
everyone
produce.
is.
It is, and I think it's okay. I don't wish to see them disappear from the market forever. They're pretty important as far as the carpet community goes, as far as the variety. They definitely do have some neuro, but so does the spider gene in ball pythons, and they make some cool stuff, and they're not for everyone, and people have varying opinions, and I think that's important. I think it just adds another layer of authenticity to somebody's projects. Like, this is what you do like, this is what you don't like, and I think that's healthy. As long as people acknowledge, you know, the extremes associated with it, and that you're never gonna get a super jag. You're never gonna produce a leucistic that lives. You're not gonna magically create a gene that produces functioning lungs in a super jag. That's just not possible. So don't aim for that. But if people understand them, I think they're fantastic. I have one currently. I only had two or two or three at most, but they're very important, and they're part of a history of morelia. So I think it's worthwhile if people are into that stuff to still acknowledge them.
I don't think it doesn't seem that you have any qualms about crossing species as far as morelia goes, or subspecies rather. But obviously you keep some things separate and some things together. So what are kind of your thoughts, and how do you keep what, and where's your boundaries with that?
Yeah, I do have a line in the sand. I think for me, I would probably have to really comb my species to double check that I'm aligning with what I'm saying here. But I feel like a full species hybrid is too much for me. A subspecies cross, if there is an end game, such as a JAG project, I think is much more acceptable, which is the only reason why I have a diamond coastal jungle cross mix, some gamma stuff, and it looks great.
Yeah, it's one thing if it's gamma rather than, just a regular bullshit.
Yeah,
of some sort.
and I have crosses. I personally would never purchase or breed a bredli jag. For those who don't know, bredls are a completely different species.
Are bredls your line?
Yeah, that's kind of my line. I would never do a bredl jag, but I think jungle jags are acceptable. And who knows? Maybe we'll have this conversation 2 years from now, and I'll be like, no, the only jag is a coastal jag, and it won't be in my collection either. I mean, who knows? Right. But for right now, I think my line is at the speciation. Subspeciation, it really depends. I think this stays in line with that, but I don't support any hybridization of species that are not like regularly commercially available, like a Collins or a Coma or any of that stuff. I think those are just straight abominations, and like good for you for breeding a Bolins to a carpet python. But seriously, jump off a cliff. Like, fuck you for doing that.
Well, they were just like, I gotta make something out of this animal.
Dude,
so let me just breed it to whatever.
That's just a horrible thing. It's horrible. You can't undo that. That thing fucking exists. That whole clutch exists. That shit is there. Guess what? You've ruined history.
As a person who have spent enough money to own a Bolins, you would think you have enough fucking respect for the species that you spent that much money on to not do that.
Money doesn't equal class.
I have to think that the people who do that are just like, they're literally sticking a finger in there. Or how many people I can piss off doing that.
They're trying to fuck with us.
But the people who are doing hybrids of other species that are like $100 animals, like whatever, do your thing. Like I really don't want to infringe on people's rights to like keep and do whatever it is they want to do. Like you do you, like for real, you do you. You want to hybridize some shit, go for it. But if you're talking about a species that like 10 people have captively propagated, like you shouldn't be
put your energy towards that.
Like there's a reason I don't keep Bolins pythons. I could sell everything in here and afford maybe a pair, but you don't see me doing that because that's irresponsible.
You would take the focus that it took to breed those animals.
Yeah, no, to do anything other than that is just silly to me. It's just silly. But it happens. And I don't really want people to think I'm hating on them for that. Because, like, to be honest, like, I have no say in what you do with your animals. You can get a beard dragon, breed it to your savannah monitor. I don't care. I don't know if that works, but I don't care.
But someone's going to try it one day.
Probably.
And that savannah monitor is not going to be hungry at the end of the day.
Yeah, you're probably right. I know he wouldn't be.
There's 2 questions from the chat. I don't know if this is a sore subject, but our friend Gustavo asked what happened to the bull snake you had up on Morph Market.
Oh, I sold him. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Gustavo's been looking for bull snakes. So that's
Oh,
why
Gustavo, man. Look for Travis Johnson, Living
That's what
Legless
we told him.
Reptiles.
Living Legless. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got 3 or 4 clutches going right now. He's a really, really close friend of mine. He does localities as well as morphs. The reason he's not up there is because there was somebody out in Montana to put together a nice Yellowstone County, Montana bull snake trio out there, and I figured they're probably better equipped than I. It ended up in my possession just sort of out of circumstance. As much as I love bull snakes, I can't make room for another project. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second question is from Brandon Sander.
And by the way, Brandon, I wanted to hit on because he was talking about carpondros, and he likes carpondros, and I used to not like carpondros, but then I went to Tony Jerome's house and seeing 50-50 jungle.
Yeah, those are cool.
And you're just like, this little fiery demon from fucking hell looking thing is the coolest thing ever. But
outside of Tony's collection, you don't like them. Is what you're saying.
That's a hybrid that, again, I personally wouldn't keep. I would never breed. I would never keep. But I think they're freaking cool.
And it's also Tony bred an amazing looking jungle to a great looking green tree. He didn't just take a fucking coastal jungle bullshit from a pet store and bring it to some fucking Biak.
Well, and the bottom line is too, we're not releasing these animals out into the wild, so who gives a fuck? You know, we're all doing whatever the fuck we want to do anyway, so it's all good.
But it better look cool enough.
Yeah. And that was cool. And those things are really cool. Like, I really like, I actually reached out to Tony talking to him about Papuans because he seemed like when he was on your guys' show, he was asking for people to reach out. And I was like, well, I don't have any experience personally owning them, but I've handled a couple of them. And so I talked to him briefly, and man, he's got a cool mind about things. And I love that he's the one doing those carpondros. Those are cool.
Yeah. It's Tony's something awesome. Where it's like, because it's Tony, I'm like, that's cool. Everyone else.
Yeah, he seems like a super nice guy.
Yeah, just because he's obviously so into it. It's not just because he had those two things. It's like because he really loves what the outcome is.
But and you see that through every like bit of his collection, how like dedicated he is. I mean, he puts us to shame for how he keeps those things.
Everything is 3-foot cages, white. Perfect
beautiful
lighting.
I mean, it's just gorgeous. It's like a little museum.
Photos are top notch too. High focus, macro with the nice little watermark right there in the bottom corner, just like right there.
Using dad jokes in the captions and stuff.
His dad jokes are seriously
so
point.
Good.
They're great. Okay, sorry, I didn't actually ask the question, but Brandon said, what about breeding jungles back into jungle jags?
I think that as far as what other people have told me, that's like the best way to really enhance a lot of the yellow and improve them. As far as I know with jungle jags, the more diamond in there, the more tipping you'll get and really cool edging. The more jungle you throw in there, the brighter that yellow negative space becomes. Especially if the jungle that you're throwing in there is of selectively bred designer lines. So the jungle jag I have is a 62.5%. So she's the product of a 50-50 jungle jag bred back to like a 75% jungle coastal. Something along those lines. So it's kind of that midway. So if you were to do a 50-50 as far as like a jungle to a coastal jag, you'll sort of get a baseline of that yellow. And the more jungle you put into that, the brighter that yellow gets for sure.
Yeah. So obviously that mutation will still carry on despite the fact that obviously more coastal blood is being pumped into the animal. So you're getting more jungle blood while still carrying that incomplete dominant mutation.
Correct. Yeah, the more jungle you throw in there, even with the jag, you'll steadily increase the vibrancy and the pronounced effect of that yellow in that negative space for sure.
Mm-hmm. So I want to completely switch gears because obviously we're getting to the end.
Let's do it.
Also, thank you for staying past time.
Hey, I'll stay as long as you want.
But I want to talk about, because you have started to get some king snakes, I see.
Oh, I didn't
Cali
know that.
kings at that. Holy shit, don't get too fucking excited.
My phone dropped. I didn't know you were into king
I thought that was your beer. I was like, fuck.
Yeah. My first snake when I was 8 years old was a very traditional black and white banded cow king. And I had that animal for a long time, despite its frequent outings. But that was back before like dominating tanks and things. So it was like you had a little tank with a sliding glass lid, and it or sliding screen lid, and it slid in, but there were no clasps. And you just get out like once a week. It got out for 2 months one time, and we kept the tank set up. We're like, yeah, this thing's fucking gone. And then I hear my neighbor scream like, ah! We run over there, and she's like in her back, like we bolt through her front door, through the living room, through the back, and she's sitting on doorstep freaking out. She's like, oh my God, it fell off the roof and hit me on the arm. And there's my snake. I was like, oh, sweet, later. And
well, it's one thing for a California king snake to live in California, but I lived in upstate New York when I was little. My corn snake got out. Yeah. And we found it a year later in the summer. We found a corn snake after a year of living in upstate New York in my backyard, dude.
That's very impressive.
And it was like twice the size.
Tony?
He didn't give a fuck. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or no, it wasn't Tony. It was the one before him.
Yeah. So I wasn't intending on getting king snakes, and I happened to be at a show, and I was walking around. I was working with my local pet store, and I was like, I'm just gonna walk around. And I was walking past the table and I did one of these. I was like, oh shit, hello. And I look, and it's nothing but females on the table, which is odd. But most of them are non-localities and a few others. And I was like, well, I mean, I really want a pair. I don't know why, because in this state I have to have a captive bred wildlife permit. But I knew that I wanted king snakes because that's, like, it's just nostalgic. That's where I got my start. And I was like, well, how much is this female? And it's a non-locality striped female. They're like, oh, $40. I was like, okay, I want her. Do you have any males? And I'm like, oh. And I was like, the only male we have is, because this is the second day, so chances are they had more and they sold out. The only male we have is this really high white, striped aberrant animal over here. And I was like, how much is he? And I'm like, 120. And I was like, well, let me see him. And they pull him out, and he's like, freaking bucket list king snake.
Dude,
like,
it's like A+++.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, I don't even care.
It's not just a high white.
I was like, how much for both of them? And they're like, oh yeah. And I gave them the poker face, like I'm thinking about it, but at the same time, like, I have the money in my wallet. I don't care what you tell me. It's happening, but I'm gonna make you think about it. Yeah. And they give me like $10 off, and I was like, okay.
Pulling my leg.
I'll take both of them.
And it's weird because
and they boxed them up, and then I was like, these are beautiful snakes.
Because it's like at one point, you're used to morelia, so you're like, all right, $250 is probably what I'm going to pay for anything that's worth anything.
Dude, yeah, absolutely. So,
okay, I have to say, I hadn't looked at this before.
And your picture's fucking
but
great.
Yeah, that was my second question. I just pulled up your Instagram on our computer, and I'm looking at it. That is like insanely high white. Like, that is gorgeous. Also, second, how do you get such good pictures?
And the reflection.
Which photo is that? What's the?
It was posted on February 1st.
Is it on a black,
yes.
like reflective? Yes. Yeah, that's black glass. That's a sheet of just straight black glass with a strobe light shot behind it. So basically, you set up black glass, you put up a black curtain, you point the strobe away from it so it bounces off the wall. You turn off enough lights in there so you have some light to focus on your subject, but enough where that strobe dominates it, and just for your camera to focus, essentially. And
That sounds like
then
a
you
lot of
start-
effort.
I have a buddy who's a camera whiz, and I get to use all of his equipment. He does professionally, and I provide him animals for his sort of
Portfolio.
experimentation and portfolio. Yeah. He's really getting a kick out of shooting with the geckos because they're fun on black glass. But I just use his equipment and I follow his lead, and I sort of understand a little bit about like aperture and things. But this is that female. She's got a fuzzy in her from yesterday. She's not a locality stripe. She just has sort of that nice black standard say color proportions as far as the black and white goes, but it's just kind of a freak stripe. It has nothing to do with where she was collected or her ancestors. She's captive bred, but they all they're pretty good. They're man, you guys know you love watching king snakes feed.
I love king snakes.
They like snow cone the whole thing. They eat the crap out of it. You're like, you just killed the death out of that dead rodent. Good for you.
They're like the least trustworthy things, but they're little and they're fun. I don't trust any of them.
It's all fun and games, right?
Yeah, anything could be food to that thing. It doesn't care.
You know, it's funny. Both of my king snakes are pretty mellow. Both of my children's pythons are also pretty mellow, and those are two species
notorious
for being little finger biters.
Yeah.
Yeah. My children's pythons have never bit me, and I've had them for over 3 years.
Yeah, that's wild. And I didn't know that so you must be getting pretty close to breeding size on them as well.
Oh, they'll breed this coming year. The female actually cycled for me this previous season. I had no intention of breeding her. She was not in a rack where I temp cycled or anything. She just decided she was gonna ovulate, and she went through the whole process. I saw it all. She swelled up like a balloon. 2 years old. Only recently eats adult mice, and she's ready to go. So this year I'm actually gonna give them a crack at it. They're tiny. They live in 32 quart tubs. They're tiny. I don't know if it's going to be a good idea or a bad idea, considering how big of a pain in the ass the babies are to get feeding, from what I hear. So I could end up eating these words entirely.
But it's worth it.
But you can get some.
I'm gonna do it anyway.
I love them. I don't know why.
They're super cool. They're super cool. My friend Andy Grossman is the one who produced my adults, and he's got like the Marble Children's and a few others, and just Antaresia in general are just fantastic snakes. Mm-hmm. It's worth the headache of establishing babies.
Yeah, that's something that I really loved. We saw at Pythons in a Pear Tree, or Marco Pinel's table. He has Marble, I believe it's children. And I was like, these are adorable and cool and everything you could ever want. Like, why aren't people into these? It's like $150 and no one gives a shit.
Yeah, it's sad the price point that they're at because of the amount of effort that goes into them. And to be honest, if I were there walking around, I would have grabbed at least 2 tigers from Michael and at least a pair of children, because an M-Pen tiger that's up there, man. Holy cow.
So have you never been to Dallas?
Not on vacation or recreation. I've flown in and out of there for work and conferences, but that's it.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, even being here, you're like, we have Michael Pinel, but we don't have Jason Balin.
True.
But you guys also on the West Coast.
I mean, California has everything, including.
Yeah, I mean, Nick's up in Washington, Todd's in LA.
Yeah.
True. You don't ever need to leave
I mean,
California
Phil's
for
out
what
in
you need.
Germany, so when he comes through to the United States, he's wherever the show is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, I just think there's great people everywhere, but luckily we have the powers of the internet. But someone like Michael Pinnell, where you're like at the show and
I need an M-Pen coastal. Bad.
I'm not even there's your high white.
There he is. I've been coaxing him out.
Gorgeous.
He's got a fuzzy in him right now.
So that's your male?
Yep.
Okay.
So pretty. I love it.
Check this tail out.
And the belly's pure white.
I love his tail because his tail goes black. Oh, sorry, bud.
He's like, fuck you, dude. And
I hate you. Oh, he's like, this is what the hognose do. I'm going to do it too. Holy crap. I'm a bastard. There we go.
Oh, I see it.
Oh,
I saw a glimpse.
Color.
There you go.
Fuck. That's cool.
He's got the black ventral scales on his tail. What a dick.
And I find that even in corn snakes, we have a bunch of pattern mutations that the pattern actually breaks at the cloaca and then changes.
Yeah, he's got an almost, I would say, 95% white belly. And then his tail ventral scales are 100% black. Holy shit, stop. Good God. When did you become a king snake?
Yeah, you were talking all this shit before, and now he's making your words.
You heard me. What an asshole.
But it's something like
we get a hognose out, and none of us will be able to talk
because they suck.
Yell the whole time.
It's things like that blow me away. As far as you can have a snake that's as different as that high white king snake, and then have something that's a subtle morph in ball pythons that's so much of a bigger deal when like king snakes will change their belly pattern, all this stuff, and there's not even technically a mutation. It's just lime red stuff going on. It's like
it's a natural variation. That's what has me hooked on carpet pythons.
Yeah.
If you, for example, if you wanted to just pick one subspecies or locality, say for example, you were just like, I just want to work with coastals. You could work with nearly a dozen different localities, half a dozen different morphs, variations of those in between, and then just natural variation amongst the subspecies itself. You could really design hundreds of different breeding pairs just around coastals just because of their natural variation. I mean, it's absolutely absurd the amount of natural colors and patterns and stripings and localities and this and that, and it all just blends in perfectly. Or you can go out and get a little bit of everything and still not even scrape the surface of like what is fully out there.
I mean, you can go you get a Brisbane and a fucking inland, and you're like, this is not the same animal.
Dude, inlands are amazing. I need those. I'm an idiot for passing up on those. I had an opportunity to buy some a couple of years ago, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to spend that. I was like, oh, you're dumbass.
For anyone who buys a caramel coastal and doesn't just get a Brisbane, or who buys an axanthic and doesn't just get an inland, for some reason it hurts my soul, just because it's like people aren't working with the Brisbanes, people aren't working with the inlands, but they do the same exact thing as the axanthic coastals and then also the caramel coastals, in my opinion.
I have both, dude, and I will tell you right now, I have caramels. I've seen super caramels. I do not own super caramels. I have axanthics and I have het axanthics, and I have seen beyond what I own. And I will tell you that inlands are a different, a whole nother level. They cross the spectrum into sort of like blue. They're that amazing. And if you want red stuff, you need red lie. If you like red pythons, you need red lie. Anything that's keeping you from that is a silly little speed bump. They're just amazing. I mean, I don't even care what bloodline it is, Lazic, hair, whatever. Just get a bredli. If you want a red snake, trust me, you will not be disappointed. I mean, Morelia has everything for everyone. You want size, you want more manageable, you can get it. You can get 8, 10 footers. You can also get 4 footers. You can get color. You can get natural tones. You can get, I mean, just whatever you
I want a melanistic, Riley. What do I do?
Go get yourself a hypocoastal.
Oh,
What? I
shit.
need some of those. Those things are, dude. And hypocoastals are different from Carmos, so there's a whole nother layer, and it's not done. Like we can't. We're closed off to Australia. We're
Closed off.
Australia.
Nothing could ever come here.
But it's not done. Like get Morelia. Trust me, people. Trust me, people. Trust me.
So where?
They just recently subdivided green trees into 2. So there's that. That's a new apple to bite into. There's Morelia carinatus. If you want rough scales, there's that. I mean, Morelia. For people who want a ball python level of variety, it's a teensy bit more of activity. The variation in size, but you can kind of go either way.
I think they're much easier to keep than a ball python. They'll eat all the time and do whatever the fuck you want.
He said it first.
I mean, there's 0 humidity issues. They eat pretty much every time. Yeah. I keep them 85 degrees instead of like 90 degrees like you'd keep a ball python.
They're bulletproof.
Yeah.
They're studs.
So as far as bredli, since we hit on that a little bit, are you interested in bredli morphs? Are you working with bredli morphs, or are you just working with separate lines, or do you even care about the lines?
I do care about the lines. Actually, one of the cool things about Morelia is that it's really taught me to appreciate some of the work that was done prior to entering this community. And because of the closed border status, that elevates the value of preserving the work within the genus from those who came before us, in my opinion. Maybe not necessarily monetarily the value wise. I mean, just in terms of preserving something. I think the hypo gene, the stonewash gene, the genetic stripe. Oh man, I would love to get into it. The reason I haven't is simply financial on my end.
Mm-hmm.
But I also love that there are people who pay attention to documenting Lazic line, Harris line, just paying attention to who the different stock came from. Even if we know that the only founding animals came from like these 4 or 5 animals, the more detail, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you cross it or not is that's up to you. That's beside the point. I try to keep information, even for some of like the more cross projects. I try to like at least just know who the parents were and what was involved. It doesn't have to be about purity. It's just good to know. So I like when people maintain lines and localities and things, but I also don't poo-poo people who, cross that or mix it or incorporate it into other projects. I mean, to each his own. Do your thing. As long as there's somebody who's preserving the original stuff, that's good.
Right. I think me and Steven, when we talked to Steven Katz, he was talking a little bit of genetic stripe, and we were talking about how drab they are now, but it's like once you get hypo in there, hoping you get a really bright genetic stripe animal would just be great. Especially, I mean, you're someone who's working with striped jungles or something like that. I mean,
yeah, I mean, even seeing a big adult striped female, they're dark. That's a badass animal. I don't care who you are. You put somebody puts an 8-foot striped female bredel in your hand, your jaw's gonna drop. You're gonna be pretty damn impressed. Yes, adding hypo in there will be even more epic. Yes, adding stonewash in there, we'll just like throw it in there. And if I'm not mistaken, hypo seems to be one of those polygenic sort of allelic things. So the more you throw in there, I could be wrong. I don't know. I don't want to speak out of turn. I just know that when those folks working with it, when they post hypos for sale, they mention whether or not it was from a hypo to hypo pairing or a hypo to normal. Yeah. If you look at the people posting hypo bred-lie available, typically they will post whether or not it came from a hypo to hypo pairing or a hypo to a Harris line or Lazic line or something of that. And my understanding is because that's because it's an allelic thing, but I don't want to commit to that. I don't want to misspeak out of turn because I do not work with those animals in particular.
Mm-hmm. As far as morelia goes, what do you look to get into, or even as far as snakes go, what do you look to get into the future?
I want to expand my Brazilian Rainbow Boas. I really enjoy the species. I like boas.
Does that include Morse?
A little bit. Yeah, it's always been. I've always really liked the hypos. I actually have a nice metallic sort of printing of a hypo up on above my door that I really like. I like a lot of the polygenic stuff. To me, anything that Dave Calling, I'm really interested in, simply because I agree with his morals and ethics as far as the hobby goes, and he's a really good role model. And so I think you can't go wrong emulating a little bit of that. So I'd like to go that route. I don't know.
I feel you on that fact as far as some of the people, like sometimes I talk to a person and it's not so much on the podcast, although it is on the podcast when I talk to Barron's Racers with John Michaels, but
yeah,
like, it's like fucking some people, especially in person, and you meet like an old school guy at a reptile show. Someone like Stu Tennyson, who we had on the podcast, but it's somebody who's probably never been on a fucking podcast. You know, he's an old school guy, but like, he's legit in every form of the fashion. You're like, I should take a few pages out of this book, you know, and like hope that I have the longevity of this. Also the focus and like the just thirst for knowledge, even though you're so far into it, like still having so much love for the animal.
And the dedication.
Like, yeah.
We talked. Sorry.
You got to turn that bitch on.
That bitch?
Yeah.
We're going to call Mike's bitches
now? Got to call your mic a bitch.
Okay, sorry.
God,
totally. No, you cannot have another one. The last one's mine.
Okay, go.
There should be all for me anyway, by the way. They're beat a beer.
I know this conversation. I deal with it all the time.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Girls are mean.
No, I'm just a bad drinker.
Also, wait, I've been meaning to ask this whole podcast, what beer are you drinking?
It is the Belching Beaver Deftones IPA.
Never heard of it.
That's intense.
But interesting.
I shouldn't have had as many as I've had.
That's how we feel. I even put in the chat, like, maybe we shouldn't drink 8% alcohol content beers for the podcast.
Yeah. This is called the Belching Beaver Deftones Phantom Bride IPA. 7.1%.
Yeah.
1 pint. Oh, this is my 4th pint.
That's pretty good.
That's kind of how we're feeling right now.
I didn't have tequila before this time.
Shit.
I felt like we were getting on to something good. And you were about to
Oh, no, please. Sorry.
I lost it.
Something about old school breeders and the dedication.
Okay, sorry.
Boom, yes. We did it. We got it back.
Got it back. Thank you. Like with Stu, we had Stu. He's been in it forever. Yeah, he still talks about like going out and herping for like 55 hours to find one fucking snake.
Yeah.
God, I don't want to do that now. Like, I'm definitely not going to want to do that when I'm your age. But like, it's cool to talk to people like that.
Yeah.
Well, you see too many people who get burnt out, I think, and you're like, fuck, man. Like, I don't know. So it's
Right.
like you love to see those kinds of people.
Who
'Cause it's
still
like I want to
stuck with
keep this
it.
going forever.
Yeah, it's funny. I try to talk to people, whoever will listen, and occasionally I meet people that are like they've been in it for decades, and they have this just like kind of bummed approach about it, and I feel like I want to like help them somehow rejuvenate that fire, and it's I don't know. Some
Yeah.
people just get burnt out, like you said.
I guess it's like, I guess especially if you're doing it for a living, at
Yeah.
some point, like those guys seem so stressed out about, because at some point you have to mix your passion with business, and it's kind of.
I mean, you ask anybody, you're going to get a pretty much a split sort of tally. People who would be like, yeah, I think I would enjoy it. And people who are like, no, that would ruin it for me.
Right.
Right.
And it's so funny because when him and I first started dating, like, and I knew this was his passion and something he wanted to do, as his main job eventually, I assumed everyone was like that. I was like, oh, why wouldn't everyone want to make their passion their job? Like, isn't that the best of both worlds? But like through this podcast, I've learned how many people like, no, like if I make it my job, then it's not my passion anymore. And that
Yeah,
sucks.
for sure. I think it all comes down to everybody's personality. Like some people, like I think me personally, I would eat it up. I think that'd be fantastic if I had a big chunk of property where I could devote to tortoises, crocs, this, that, whatever, really diversify a little bit more than I am now, but have a big building that's devoted to sort of my passion projects.
I think that's what I feel like the successful people I see is they have a bread and butter, but they also keep things that keep them engaged.
Yeah, and then I think there's a little bit of whether or not the market aligns with what you do. This and I think that alone is something you cannot predict. So you let's say you find yourself just overly infatuated with blue-tongued skinks, leopard geckos, and ball pythons. Well, you've got a great market base to really succeed, as opposed to somebody who comes in and is like, well, I really enjoy green anacondas.
Even Madagascar and hogs, if you were to go
Madagascar Hognose, Vietnamese blue beauty. You're just like all of a sudden you're talking to people who are like, what the hell did you just say? And it's
right.
So there is a little bit of the market trend that it influences that. I love seeing people who keep corn snakes because I don't know why. I don't know why I love it because I've never kept a corn snake.
That's
and
fucking.
All I hear from other people is like they're like, I hate corn snakes. They're so basic. Blah, blah, blah.
It's like, because you haven't kept them in fucking forever, or you
never.
never.
Munchkin land.
About them, and these things seem to be hardy as hell. And there's like dozens of morphs. Like I don't know anything about them, so I saw all your posts this morning. I was like, dude, what is this? I don't know anything about this. It's like mahogany and gray, and you're like, this is probably a normal. I'm like, what the fuck? What? Like, and my friend Ryan Dumas of Rad Reptiles, he has Oakdee Hunt Club corn snakes. I'm like, what the shit? And you're all about and rough scales, and you got these corn
locality, man.
Yeah, and he posts photos of them. Like, those are gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I think I appreciate that a lot more when somebody's into something that's obscure, not because it's popular.
I think there's something to even the most common things. You can get deep enough to where you can have an appreciation to where like no one knows that corns are as versatile as they are. They're arboreal, terrestrial, fucking, they're up during the night, during the day. They're all over the place. They eat whenever you want. They're everything. They're intelligent. People think that pythons are somehow above them. And I have plenty of pythons and I love pythons, but colubrids are more highly evolved forms of a python. They're more highly evolved snakes, and they're super intelligent, and you don't give them enough credit. And that goes for most colubrids, because nobody likes colubrids anymore because those aren't cool for whatever reason.
Well, think about like a lot of the old school herpers, a lot of the guys that have sort of shaped the market. The majority of them, if not all of them, started out in colubrids, if not still like sort of pursue that on their own time. I mean, I'm friends with Todd at Psychotic, and every time I would go visit and talk to him, I mean, inevitably the discussion would end up going back to rubber boas and milk snakes and
rubber boas.
Fucking what the shit are they? Damn it, not rubber boas, but
like rosy boas.
There you go, rosies.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Dude's all about rosy boas and gophers and all that. I mean, I don't know what. I mean, maybe my sample size is small, but some of the people that seem to appreciate a lot of the like diehard, like natural snakes are the people that are into colubrids.
And they're all 55 plus. So what does that say to us? You know, someone has
16 years ahead of my time.
It says you're an old man at home. And my comment isn't going to be as effective now, but it was going to be effective a couple of minutes ago when Riley, you talked about like you like people who are into stuff that's not as popular. Well, this dude right here he was born with that gene, I think, of being into stuff that isn't popular. This motherfucker is a Jets fan, which is
I'm sorry.
Stupidest shit in the whole world.
Super Bowl 2, hell of a year.
I'm a Niners fan, so there's decades where I understand that pain.
Like, he's from New York. Yeah, he's a Jets. Like, I don't know. And then to reiterate, he's from New York, yet he's a New Jersey Devils fan, which is whole. Like, he loves being. Even though he's gotten me into the Devils, but like he loves being the like fan for shit that everyone around him doesn't like. So maybe that's why like he likes corn snakes.
Hey, all I know is that the majority, if not all of the people I know that have kept corn snakes have never messaged me asking for husbandry advice or questions or like it's not eating, it's sick, whatever. It never happens. Never.
I love the fact that most zoos, at least the ones here in Texas, their corn snake exhibit is like there's like a hoe in there. It's like a barn with like a bunch of tools and shit. It's like just basically just put a corn snake in your house. It will have the same husbandry as it does in the zoo exhibit.
Yeah.
Because they're just
like, rattlesnake exhibits like that.
Yeah. There's like corn snakes love to be in abandoned houses and barns. Like they don't give one fuck.
Damn, where you put them. They're good. This spot right here? Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, cool.
Just give me mice.
Oh, yeah. There's food coming in like 3 months. Okay, I'll wait. Right here. Over here. Later. Bye.
Yeah, that's why they're awesome. And they have so many different fucking looks.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. Overrated, for sure.
I will support corn snakes to the death.
Oh, to the death.
To the death.
That's a lot, man.
I mean, I already have to support it so much being your freaking girl. Do you know how hard it is to be a girlfriend of a snake owner, man? I gotta support him to the death already, okay?
Is your girl is it a girlfriend, wife, fiance?
He said wife.
It might as well be any of the above.
That's a good and bad answer, probably.
At this point, I mean, my family already refers to her as like the fiance, niece, whatever. It's just a matter of time. But yeah, she is a zookeeper, but she was not a big reptile person per se. Didn't mean she was averse to them. And when we started dating, I had 20-something ball pythons, a dozen or so carpets, and a few odds and ends. And I hatched out my first ball python clutch while we were just starting to date. And it was pinstripes and normals, and I sold everything but one male normal. And she didn't like the fact that he was literally worth nothing because he's a normal male. But he was literally the first animal that pipped his head out the egg. And so here we are, however many years later, and she still has him. I still have the who's in this tub right there. So we've kept him, and so she now has a Russian tortoise. We have a couple crested geckos. She has guinea pigs. I have not guinea pigs. But yeah, she's supportive of what I do as long as it like stays in the room. Like I've got an extra bedroom, quarantines in the living room, and then her ball python lives in our bedroom.
I think that's funny how that works, though. Even though she's cool, obviously she's a zookeeper with animals.
Yeah,
she's still not 100% cool with the fact of reptiles. She's not like 100% gung ho with everything.
No, and I probably didn't make things easy on her because while we were in Santa Barbara, I worked plenty of shows, and so for those weekends, I was like, I'm going to be in Pomona or wherever. And I told her, you do not have to worry about the snakes. I have to let things go. But being a good person, she would go out of her way to do that, and it never ended well.
Oh no!
She'd put herself in harm's way even when I told her not to. And I'd come back. She's like, "This fucking jungle bit the shit out of me. Your goddamn savannah monitor chewing on my sweatshirt." Oh God! I told you didn't have to do anything. So she's a saint. Like she's really put up with a lot, and I told her when we first got our own place, when we were down in Santa Barbara, I said, as long as I have a reptile room, I don't care what you do with the rest of the place. And that seemed to be the right thing to say. And so that worked for while we were down there. When we moved up here, I said the same thing. I was like, as long as I have a reptile room, we're good. And up in the bedroom, the quarantine ended up in the living room. Quarantine gets used, the incubator's empty. So, I pay the bills and we're all good. So
yeah. I mean, that's how we roll. We have an extra bedroom, and then
that seems to be a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Right? You're not looking at me happy right now.
I'm looking at you because that's not how it's always been. They were in our bedroom for a solid bit.
Oh, yeah. You're talking to me. They're in my bedroom for like 6 years before you came around.
Before I came around, but then they were in our bedroom.
I lived in a place, I had the master bedroom in there. It was probably like a 14 by 12 foot room with the bed like up against the wall. Everything circumvented the bed, like floor to ceiling. And for like 3 or 4 months, her lease was up and she decided she was going to tolerate living with me in that place. Well, it was a 3-bedroom, 1 bathroom, 3 gentlemen, and a collection of 80 snakes.
Yeah.
So she was a champ.
That's pretty good that she stuck it through that.
That's yeah, definitely. I owe her big time eternally. So, so needless to say, things have only gone up and gotten better. But she has her investment in them. We've rescued some crested geckos, literally from the roadside that are hers. So and she has a Russian tortoise, and she appreciates reptiles. She's worked in the zoo field, so she, there's no love lost anywhere. I just, I purposely sign up for the brunt of all the cleaning and nastiness, of course.
Yeah, I mean, we do the same. Even though most of the Cali Kings, I bought the dotted Cali King, but you bought the other 2 Cali Kings, right?
I buy them. He takes care of them.
Yeah. So it's like she loves the Cali Kings. I don't know if it's because she loves them or because they're the only ones that she paid for.
She probably loves the fact that she bought them and you're cleaning them.
Yeah.
I love them before we buy. I don't know.
Colubrid shit a lot.
Yeah.
I have
the Cal Kings,
but
at least the ones that we have.
But I mean, someone in our chat is talking about that. Like they should. He's like, they don't eat much, but they shit a bunch. But to me, their shit isn't bad. I mean, compared to our fucking olive python, holy crap! I look at this shit of that thing.
You need dries. Olive pythons would be a cakewalk if you had dries.
Yeah, no, we're not going that far.
There's a female in here. She poops 3 times a week. Oh, did I lose you guys? I broke it. I think I broke it. All right. We're waiting. Ah. In case people are watching. It's a zebra. Don't bite me in the face. That would suck. Oh, damn. I've been bitten in the face 3 times. All carpet pythons. All because I made a mistake. Get away from me. You're going to bite me in the face. No, no. There we go. All right. In case anybody can see me.
Hey!
Hey!
Bro, I've never turned off the computer before, but we just turned off the computer and blew a fuse all in the same.
Yeah,
Sick.
somehow we blew a fuse. I have no idea how.
We
but
have all the thermostats going on in here, and we do this show clearly.
Yeah,
every week.
I can see you've got electricity going. I can see it in that third
but for a
behind you.
second, it was all gone. Literally, this whole room, all the electricity was gone.
That's dope. That's
I
fun.
had-
Now we're playing
hold on.
No, that was on the phone.
Oh,
I have people messaging me telling me, keep going, we can see you. You're still on. I'm like, oh, I hope I wasn't just picking my nose.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck just happened. I guess we just got too excited.
Hey, it happens. It happens.
All right, so how can we wrap this up appropriately?
Holy shit.
What's
Sorry.
like good questioning? What you got there?
Man. You just made a huge mess. What dick. It's one of my hognose. He's being
Ew.
weird. This is the one who actually eats off the tongs.
So that's a pretty large snake.
Yeah, he's the size of a bull snake. He's
Yeah.
a big boy.
I think that's what's kind of cool about them. They have so much the pattern resembles a bull snake.
So he has a lot of pattern. As far as the animals that I have, he's the most contrasted and the most pattern. The one I worked with at the zoo was completely black, melanistic all the way through, with the exception of some white belly scales. So I would imagine that's sort of the spectrum. This being probably more of the norm. These guys have some pretty heavy scars too. Like, all of my animals have bite marks in them. Like, something's chewed on these snakes out in Madagascar. Like,
I don't think there's. I had an animal similar to that, but from Nigella, which I think is off of Madagascar. I had a Candoya carinata.
Yeah,
had a big old fucking chunk out of its back and didn't give one fuck.
Yeah.
Have a nice day. Let me go about my fucking life.
As hell. He's
Yeah.
cool though.
He had a nub tail and a fucking chunk out of his back. Didn't give one fuck.
They're savage like that.
Dan asks, show a striped jungle. So that'll be one of the last things if you can.
I can. I'm gonna have to take my headphones off and
go for it, and we'll talk.
Yeah. So I'll go grab him because he's technically in quarantine, but he's more than beyond due for clearing and based on where I'm doing it.
Well, if anything happens, it's our fault, clearly.
Well, no, he's the only reason I haven't moved him into quarantine is just because I haven't had the time to set up his tub. I've got it ready to go. He's beyond clear. It's just I do things on my weekends. So yeah, I'll go grab him.
I got you. Sweet.
And while he's gone, let's apologize officially. I guess if you're listening to this on the downloads later, you won't actually notice it. Yeah, you'll cut it in the. Well, you can cut this part too in the downloads. But for people watching live, like, thank you for staying on while our electricity just decided to tell us that we were using too much. And
like I don't get what tripped it because we're not using anything.
It's not like anything changed that we haven't been using for the past 2 hours.
This where we live is like the minimum of everything. Like, just what can put a place together that looks good.
It looks really
right.
It looks really good, but it's all fake.
We've tripped too many plus we use much more electricity than normal human. But if no one remembers, during Brumation we had a fuse trip, and basically our whole collection was down to like 36 degrees.
That's pretty bad, pretty scary.
It was a little scary. It was not the best situation, but that's the situation we're in.
We survived it.
Yeah,
and we'll see if our next location's any better.
And we were 100% on our breeding. So
did we have any? We had slugs on the hognose, but that's just because they're fucking hognose and they suck. But also, we look really dark. If you want to turn a light on right now, babe,
turn a light on.
That'd be great. I'll just keep talking. So last week. Oh, here's Riley. Never mind. I don't have to talk about last week.
All right. see if
Okay.
it's straightened out.
Sat on my microphone.
So, there we go. I think you can see a bit of that there.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid stripe.
I mean, it's all the way through. I don't think it breaks until kind of around the bottom here. He's kind of got it pretty much straight behind the neck. He has ivory blood in him, which is a polygenic sort of thing. There are several lines of ivory, but Nick Mutton is most famously known for having basically bred ivory stuff for almost 25 years now, I think.
And I mean, finally unleashed that picture that pretty much broke the Morelia internet.
Yeah, that thing is black and white.
Yeah,
it makes his Xanthics look like crap.
Yeah.
So there is ivory in this animal, which is probably the reason why it is as yellow as it is. The Vandeventer line of stuff tends to have a lot of more of a sort of like a honey gold color to it, a lot like the Palmerston stuff. It's not as brightly yellow. That bright yellow neon and crisp velvet black is very much a result of selective breeding. So, considering this animal has less of that designer approach to it, and how nicely striped and yellowed is, this animal will pair nicely with that feel that I have. It's going to be absurd. I'm going to have a really hard time letting anything go from that one. So,
I mean, there's no one who's working with stripe that much, and then there's no one working with a bright yellow line of stripe. So working that into that project, I think, would be a big deal.
Yeah, you tend to get one way or the other. You get localities of striping where people are going straight for the Palmerston striping or just bright color. Amanda Kingsbury has been doing a few pure jungle, nicely striped projects where she's finally, in the last few years, been getting some really nice babies that have like killer striping and have that designer black and yellow. And some of those I was eyeballing and wasn't able to pick up this year because, life. But yeah.
So what will you be looking for in those babies? What comes first, full stripe or coloration?
I think first generation of these will be full stripe. I think adding color into something like that is the lesser of challenges given where we are with captive breeding.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And since we are getting on 3 hours,
yeah, I just had to type in the chat like I need to end this.
So is there any parting words or anything that you'd like to tell everyone, or even any words of wisdom as far as snake keeping or anything on your end?
Yeah, if anybody's averse to keeping carpet pythons because somebody told them so, at least give them a shot. Try them out. Don't let anybody dissuade you from keeping a species that you're at least curious about. Keep anything that tickles your fancy. Try it out. If it doesn't work, that's okay as well. Try things. You never know what you really enjoy, and just because somebody said it's bitey doesn't mean that it really is. Carpet pythons are sort of my quintessential species of snake, and I think a lot of people could really enjoy them. So give them a shot.
Okay, I'm eating my words on ending this podcast, but our friend Brandon had a question, and I always have to ask his questions. He said he wanted to know why you don't have any liasis.
Because I'm poor.
That's why I don't have stuff.
Trust me, I have messed with water pythons. I've messed with olives, maclots. I've interacted with everything liasis at one point or another. If I really could, I would have olives. I would have apodora. I would have several pairs of water pythons. I would have several pairs of maclots. I would be an unhealthy level of accumulation on the liasis if I had the space. They are fantastic. They're brilliant. They're intelligent, and I've had the opportunity to at least interact briefly with the majority of them. And his question is valid. I really don't have a good excuse.
I think that goes.
No,
for everyone.
being poor is a great excuse.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, but at the same time,
poor and
like
have
if you saw
liasis.
this room and then heard me say I'm poor, you'd slap me and be like, "You're an idiot as well."
True.
So,
I was very surprised you
we
saying
all
that.
have an extra bedroom that we have just for snakes. Like that is the definition of not poor, but we're still poor.
I mean, I have I have an exanthic zebra, I have albinos, I have striped jungle. I mean, I'm not poor in life and reptile experiences. I'm poor financially. Look at my bank account. I am wealthy in reptile experiences.
And that's what matters to us. Not the
You know
rest of
what?
the
To
world.
be honest, the most important thing that I've found over the last few years is how many people reptiles have connected me to, regardless of what you keep, where you draw a line in the sand, whatever. I've met more and more people over the last few years working with reptiles that I call my friends beyond any other community of anything ever, period. So God damn it, this fucking snake. Yeah, reptiles are what's up.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Riley, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, where should they connect with you?
Instagram and Facebook are probably the easiest ways. You can find me on Facebook under either just my personal profile, Riley Jimison, or under my business page, Riley's Reptiles. On Instagram, it's Riley's Reptiles. On YouTube, you can find me under Riley Jimison. I have a Twitter as well, but I'm not sure what it's under. So one of those two, just fish and shoot in the dark, you'll get there. But honestly, if anybody wants to get a hold of me, I love talking reptiles and people. If I'm with my girlfriend and she's yelling at me, I can't talk. She takes priority, but I am happy to speak with people day and night about reptiles. So if you want to message me on Facebook on my personal page, go for it. My cell phone number is 650-483-1003. Seriously.
Brandon's about to call you. He's gonna
Hit me up. I don't even care. I don't care. If I don't respond, that doesn't mean that I don't want to give you my time. It's because I'm either sleeping or going to the bathroom or having dinner. Literally.
Just to let you know, Brandon lives in California. We had Stephen Katz on. He met Stephen Katz the next day. So Brandon shows up somewhere.
Our friend Brandon, not Brandon Wheeler. Yeah.
Yeah, Brandon Sander, right?
Nope.
No.
We know three
There's a
Brandon.
secret Brandon.
Different secret Brandon.
I know there's a lot of Brandon. I'm terrible with names, so I
And-
thought I would try that one out, but I guess I flopped.
Yeah, I know. There's a ridiculous amount of Brandons in the snake community. It's weird.
How many Rileys do you know?
One.
There you go.
Number one. Forever.
For now, until I point it out, and then like 40 of them come out of the woodworks.
But thank you for being on and staying on an hour. You definitely get the award for the long. This is our longest podcast ever.
Even Bassell went 3 hours as well.
Really?
Nice.
I let it go. I didn't think I'd ever let one go that long.
Oh yeah.
That's
Okay.
hey, he's a good guy to talk to for 3 hours.
Yeah, it's mainly me because I usually get hungry.
That's okay.
So I have to.
Like
Right. If I
hungry
wasn't
too.
here, every podcast would be 3 hours. I usually stop it because I get hungry. But but I ate before this one, so it made it better.
Smart.
Oh yeah, Johnson was a long one too.
Yes,
Smart.
his did go long.
Nice.
But yeah, thank you for coming on. And I think despite it being 3 hours, we have even more to talk about with you. So we'll definitely have to have you on again.
Drymarchon.
Oh, I didn't even pull out a Crebo. That's right.
Yeah, we definitely have to have you back on, and there's more to talk about. But
Always.
hopefully we'll make it out to California soon, or you'll make it to
We'll
North.
have to go to Pomona or the whatever.
Well, so you guys are moving out to PA. I need to get out there.
I was about to say,
That's
you need to come to
true.
Northeast Carpet Fest next
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
Now we have an excuse to be like, everyone just come
Come
see us.
to.
I'm not gonna lie. There is an outstanding bet about some of us Cali folks making out this year. So
Well, Brandon was there, right?
Yeah, Brandon Wheeler made it.
yeah, as far as Tinley goes, there's another one. So,
Okay.
If some of us don't show up to Tinley, somebody is gonna be upset.
Between the two of those, we'll meet all of you guys at
Yeah,
some point.
I need to get out there because that's kind of like everything like filters out through California from the East Coast. So anything that we get seems to have like a couple year lag from you guys. So we need to remedy that.
Right? Definitely.
Yeah.
Also, if anyone wants to reach out to us, obviously Port City Pythons,
Do that.
YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. If you want to email us, it's theportcitypythons@gmail.com.
Mhm.
We will have babies posted on our website, Port
Oh.
City Oh shit.
Just got bit in the face.
Damn it! No.
Wow. Okay. We will have babies posted very soon on portcitypythons.com. This is
Everyone get a carpet python. They're nice. They're great.
I'm good.
Thank you everybody for your continued support. We super appreciate it. And thank you for watching this podcast. We will see you next week on Monday at 6 p.m. Central.
I don't know.
And whatever all the other times are. Thank you, Riley, so much. We'll talk to you later.
Well, we'll
Thanks,
still be
everyone.
on, but
Oh,
Have a good night.
everyone on the chat.
okay.